The main character is a cute little girl named Adele who has soft pink hair and big blue eyes like a clear ocean. She wants to find a family, which she has long dreamed of because she is an orphan. However, for 9 years, no one has adopted the little girl. The director of the orphanage where Adele lived often said that the current generation is cruel to children, so she should be grateful for the opportunity to stay here. Adele felt that the director was telling the truth. After all, countless people died in the war and battlefields. In addition, people died of starvation. But little Adele never let herself give up. She dreamed all her life that she would grow up in a family full of love, harmony, and happiness. The deep thoughts and dreams of the little orphan are interrupted by a blue-eyed boy who says that Adele, for a mysterious reason, was summoned by the director of the orphanage himself. The protagonist is surprised because on this unexpected day, she, as a child forgotten by everyone in the orphanage, still turned out to be needed by someone. Little Adele, going to the director's office, hopes that she has been summoned about the adoption, which she's been dreaming about for as long as she can remember, and this makes the girl more anxious. Arriving at the principal's office and opening the door, the little girl didn't expect to see what was going on there. An unknown man in beautiful dark robes and with blonde long hair stood menacingly looking at the principal, holding the sword of his blade near his own frightened face. The protagonist froze with surprise, for before her stood the aristocrat himself. At the same moment, Adele wondered why would they adopt commoners and what were they here for? After intimidating towards the headmaster, the nameless aristocrat turned around to the doorway and noticed the main character, adding words that she was the one he was waiting for. The aristocrat said that he wanted to ask Adele something first, while holding a birdcage shining with a mysterious light in his hand, which contained a beautiful, translucent bird. Kneeling in front of Adele, the aristocrat pointed at the birdcage with his hand and asked if the protagonist could hear the voice of this water spirit. Tiny Adele had never seen such beautiful birds, so she was curious to see the water spirit. But at the same time, she was not surprised to see the bird, because she had always heard the voices of the spirits of fire, earth, and air. The amazing bird, gazing intently at Adele, actually spoke to her. The parrot-like bird said that it had heard a lot about the main character. Adele looked at the aristocrat and told him the truth in hearing the words of the water spirit bird. The aristocrat, hearing Adele's words, became heartbroken and wept, admitting that no one could have thought about the fact that the child of prophecy they had been searching for several hundred years would be in an ordinary orphanage. Thinking of the headmaster, who was still kneeling and shocked at what was happening, the aristocrat turned to him with an angry look that didn't bode well for him, and the headmaster, seeing this, began to scream for forgiveness, for he thought Adele had been lying to him about her magical gift all these years. The aristocrat did not listen to the mustachioed man's cries, exclaiming the terrible words that this was not a simple order, but the order of the entire imperial family, which made the mustachioed headmaster's face fill with the most real horror. The protagonist was a little frightened by the aristocrat's shouting and stern treatment of the headmaster, but now she knew for sure that he would not touch her again. The blonde-haired aristocrat looked at Adele again, saying that the girl shouldn't live here in this orphanage. Adele continued to look at the aristocrat, bringing herself to the conclusion that knowing is excessively kind to her, and that is a very good sign. The aristocrat apologized to Adele for being rude, for he didn't even introduce himself. The blue-eyed man introduced himself as Count Daruan, loyal to the great imperial Hasfelt family. Afterward, the count asked what the main character's name was, and she modestly told him her name. The blonde-haired aristocrat smiled at the girl, telling her that the name Adele was incredibly beautiful, and soon the protagonist would receive her surname as well. The protagonist was excited about her first name because it meant that soon she would have a family and leave the orphanage. Count Darwin advised Adele to just be patient until the next day, adding that he had taken care of their secret so that it would not go beyond the walls and this forgotten place where Adele was. The little orphan still couldn't get excited and accept the thought of becoming part of someone's family. Smiling, she asked the nobleman if it was true that she would become a family, to which Count de Rouen was slightly surprised and then confirmed her words, adding that everything would happen tomorrow with the sunrise. After Count de Rouen's loud visit, Adele noticed that everyone in the orphanage started treating her differently. She was allowed not to clean and was told that selling cookies on the street was now unnecessary. During lunch, the director suddenly asked Adele to sign a document, awkwardly praising her handwriting. After signing the mysterious document, little Adele was served a delicious meat soup. The last time she had eaten it was 3 years ago. Spending time in the shade of a tall tree, Adele periodically fell asleep with thoughts of the important events coming up in her life, but her sleep was interrupted by the shouts of people and the noise of a carriage. When she opened her eyes, she did indeed see a fancy carriage from which a tall brunette with piercing red eyes stepped out, no less fancy dressed. Adele was once again surprised by this visit as she looked at the proud black-haired man, for she had rarely seen such high-status people, perhaps not even once in her life. The red-eyed man approached Adele, who was resting under a tree, asking the others if she was the one he was apparently after. His Majesty, putting his hand behind his ear and gazing thoughtfully at the protagonist with his ruby eyes, calmly proclaimed that he had been informed that Adele would be his daughter, though it was ironic that he, never married, would have a child. The unnamed handsome fellow, walking up to Adele and holding the long blade of his sword to her face, began to ponder in his voice, "Is this someone's plan to prevent him from finding a good bride or not?" The protagonist looks at His Majesty and ponders, "Is this her future daddy who will adopt her?" A man in fine clothes examining Adele tells everyone that in his opinion this little and amazing girl looks like she'll die from just a couple scratches. But, smiling, His Majesty adds words that he expects a lot from the main character. Another blonde-haired man with violet eyes and also wearing expensive clothes, being His Majesty's subordinate, tells him the important information that the child from the prophecy is before him. Adele, looking at the man of high status with delight, asks him if he is her family, to which the red-eyed man replies in the affirmative, going on to say that her adoptive father is the head of the ducal family and their last name is now Alcibiade. The protagonist is pierced by surprise at the word duke. She does not believe that he will be her adoptive father until now, because there is not a single person on the continent who does not know the duke with the nickname God of War. The little girl's thoughts are interrupted by the duke's words that this adoption is certainly not forever, which makes Adele upset, thinking that she will be abandoned and will only be in the family temporarily. Adele was jealous of the adopted children, however. After a couple months, they would go back to the orphanage due to families giving up on them. All of the children were coming back in terrible condition. There was a child who had not even been fed. Two of the Duke's servants admonish him that the child needs to be treated a little gentler, or the imperial family will be displeased. The protagonist worries about the same thing happening to her. After that, the blonde-haired man with violet eyes says that they should head to His Majesty's house. Throwing a piercing and promising look at Adele, the Duke ordered everyone to go and turned around, leaving his future daughter and the servants who bowed their heads to him. Adele curiously escorted His Majesty of the imperial family with a look, not realizing that her life, starting the next day, would be turned upside down. The next day, the protagonist is already being put into a luxurious carriage to be taken to the imperial palace. The white-haired servant of the Duke warns Adele that the road will be long. Adele sat modestly in the carriage, looking at it and sadly remembering that she never got to say goodbye to Madeline, her friend. She still thought she had dreamed it all. Madeline, a sweet girl with brown eyes, had been her best friend at the orphanage. After the Duke's visit, rumors quickly spread through the house that Adele would soon be adopted. The protagonist gradually fell asleep in the carriage, thinking that she will still be abandoned. But if they did, she would have a chance to apologize to her best friend Madeline for not saying goodbye to her. In the moments between naps, Adele noticed that a fire spirit appeared next to her, a lizard-like lizard with a cute smile that greeted the girl. Adele said hello to it as well. As Adele falls asleep, she recalls that she doesn't remember how long ago she started hearing different spirits, and in a way they became her friends over time. After a strange and sound sleep, the spirit of a fire lizard alerted Adele that she had arrived at her destination, the palace. The protagonist stood up out of sleep to wipe her eyes. Leaving the carriage, the little girl lifted her head up and gasped in amazement, for before her stood an unusually grand, beautiful, and rich palace, in which Adele was to live. After admiring the luxurious palace, Adele remembered her appearance, which looked poor and unkempt because of a simple, tattered t-shirt. After the protagonist was helped down from the carriage to the red carpet, she saw a team of palace servants in front of her, who bowed their heads to the new member of the imperial family and greeted her in a friendly manner. The maids also greeted Adele, saying that she was probably tired from such a long trip, and because of the shyness in her own Adele, embarrassed, hid behind the white-haired Duke's servant's leg. The Duke's servant warns that Adele will still have plenty of time to get acquainted with the palace servants, but now it is necessary to go inside. Once inside the palace's grand hallway decorated with incredible patterns and windows, Adele marveled, for there were beautiful light fountains right in the room. Adele felt sad again, remembering her best friend Madeline, who was not destined to see such beauty or to be with Adele at all. The girl was sad that her friend would not be able to see the palace, which was pleasing to the eye. The main character's sad thoughts about Madeline were interrupted by the polite greeting of two ladies, one of whom, with the name Noelle, was the palace's head maid, and the other, named Serena, was Adele's personal maid. Little Adele bowed politely to the maids, giving her name, to which the head maid Noelle was silently surprised, and then interrupted the awkward moment with the conclusion that she would begin caring for the protagonist with bathing procedures, which would be carried out by the red-haired maid Serena. The Count's white-haired servant insists again that they must return. Hearing this, Adele bids the blonde-haired knight farewell as modestly as she did when greeting him. Turning to the protagonist, the Duke's white-haired servant finally introduces himself as Michael and says that they should work on little Adele's overly polite manner of speaking. The little girl Adele suddenly remembers that she has heard the name Mad Dog Mikhail before in the conversation of two passing ladies when she was selling cookies on the street. Many questions arose in the little girl's mind about whether the Duke would become her father, whether she would be abandoned, and why she was promised to be protected even at the cost of her life. So Adele asked Mikhail what child of prophecy meant. But Mikhail smilingly avoided a direct answer, telling the protagonist that it was time for her to go to bed and he would answer her question later. Adele really liked his violet eyes. After Mikhail and his two assistants left the palace, the girl's personal maid named Serena asked her to follow her, calling the protagonist Miss. The maid prepared a bath for Adele, in which the new member of the imperial family enjoyed hot water for the first time in a long time, because in the orphanage she washed only in the rain or in the river. But here she takes a bath with rose petals, which in size seems to be larger than her own bedroom in the orphanage. After bathing, the main character is dressed in a pretty pink dress that perfectly matches her size and the soft pink color of her hair. Adele looked at herself in the mirror for a long time, not believing that all this beauty, clothes, procedures, and efforts were only for her, a new member of the imperial family. The stars and moon gradually appeared above the luxurious palace. The sunset changed tonight. It was getting close to bedtime. Adele can't sleep, wandering around her large and beautiful dark room in fear, trying not to cry. At this difficult moment, a small spirit with a green glow, similar to a fairy, appears in front of her, supporting her and telling her to stop crying. The protagonist admits that the reason for the tears is a longing for her best friend Madeline, whom she left in an orphanage. Adele still feels like she will be taken back to the orphanage in 2 or 4 days. But the green flying spirit assures Adele that Madeline, on the contrary, will be happy that she has found a long-awaited family, aka her friend. Adele replies that that's exactly why she's ashamed. The green fairy repeats the truth to the protagonist one last time, that she should not be ashamed of the good things that have happened to her. Suddenly, the little girl decides that she wants to talk to Mikhail, even though she should have gone to bed a long time ago. She runs to the bedroom door to open it and get out. After getting to the door with thoughts of the fact that because of her, the Duke will now not be able to marry and that she will be abandoned, she reaches out her small hand to open the door, but stops. Through the door crack, Adele saw her personal maid Serena in the hallway, talking to her coworker about the main character. Serena was telling her with anger and frustration that no one would want to mess around with a 9-year-old child, even if it was the imperial family of Alcibiades. Little Adele, upon hearing the words 9-year-old child, realized that the two maids were gossiping about her. Serena added to her words that the imperial family had mistreated the Duke because he was still very young for children. Serena continued to be indignant, saying the Duke is only 25 and Adele is 9 years old. According to her, people will think that the Duke is on the errand of the imperial family. Adele listened to them and fell into even greater sadness. The modest maid to whom Serena was telling her outrages asked what exactly was bothering her and why she was so annoyed, but she only creased her face, saying that since the mysterious she disappeared, she had changed too. Adele listened to their chatter in the hallway, but the little green fairy spirit advised her not to eavesdrop on them for her own sake, to which the protagonist replied simply that she should know what others were saying about her. The little girl confesses to the green spirit that she is very worried about the Duke's happiness. Because of her, he will not be able to marry. Adele adds that she really wanted a mom for herself, so she was upset when she found out that the Duke was not married. The main character, worried about whether her mom-to-be will ever love her, confesses to the spirit that she incredibly wants to be loved, to which the green spirit replies to her that soon everyone will love her. Adele tries not to cry, thinking about how good babies never cry. The next day, after a rough night for Adele, she wakes up in her cozy bed from the morning sunlight, noticing Serena in her room. Serena smilingly asks the protagonist if she's awake, not even giving the appearance that she actually has a personal dislike for the 9-year-old. Adele rises from her bed, stammering a hello to the maid, whereupon Serena notifies the girl that the Duke will be arriving at the palace soon, and she needs to prepare her for the morning greeting. While the personal maid brushes the protagonist's hair and dresses her in a vanilla dress, Adele is excitedly thinking about meeting the Duke, since this is her first meeting since being adopted. She wonders to Serena what she should do. Serena politely replies to her that she should just stand by her side for now. Adele and Serena stand near the entrance with a row of maids and servants lined up around it, who by tradition always wait for the Duke and his subjects to return. From behind a thicket of forests and trees appeared beautiful horses of different colors with their imperial riders, the first of which was the Duke, Adele's father. Seeing the protagonist, the Duke got off his dark horse and, looking at his adopted daughter, proudly approached her, keeping his eyes on her. Adele was wary because she smelled the pungent odor of blood from the Duke. The servants and maids greeted the Duke with a single voice to welcome him back, but His Majesty paid no attention to it, ordering him to put a towel in his hand. The Duke asked a rhetorical question about how he should treat his daughter, to which one of the servants replied clearly that he should treat her well. As if not paying attention to the servant's words, the pompous Duke looks at Adele and suddenly asks her if she wants to fight him. The protagonist is only surprised by her adoptive father's words, not understanding anything. The Duke's black-haired ward again points out to him that he should be gentler with the girl instead of being crazy and fighting the child in a real duel. His Majesty orders the servant to better watch his words to others, and also argues that many knights want a duel with him. But the Duke's knight correctly points out that Adele is too weak for any duels or duels. The Duke wonders how weak a 9-year-old girl is. The Duke kneels before the protagonist, looking into her large blue eyes, and then asks if she has slept through the night. Adele, noticing that the Duke's voice became a little kinder, decided not to lie and told the truth that she could not sleep. In response, the Duke asked the reason for her lack of sleep. And one of the Duke's underlings, who had beautiful violet eyes that Adele liked yesterday, suggested that the reason for her lack of sleep might be because she was not yet used to the palace. Once she was in close proximity to the Duke, Adele noticed his fresh and brightly colored scratch on his cheek, and then asked if the Duke had been injured. But no sooner had the Duke answered the little girl with a word than Adele, placing her hands before her lips, breathed upon them. The Duke was surprised and thought that Adele's breath had healing properties. The boldness and words of the protagonist shocked the servants and maids. Serena even covered her mouth in astonishment as she looked at everything that was happening. Leaving her breath in the palms of her hands, the girl bravely, but with a dose of shyness, stretched her hands to the Duke's face and to his wounded cheek, promising that the scratch would heal. In the past, when Adele was still living in the orphanage, a girl from the orphanage had treated her bruises and abrasions in the same way, blowing on the wounds and humming a short song. Thanks to this, the tears would stop and she would laugh again. During the whole healing process, the Duke was puzzled, so with a serious face, he asked little Adele if she had really healed him now, to which the protagonist nodded positively. Although the scratch on the Duke's face didn't go anywhere, he told Adele that she had healed him and that the wound no longer hurt, not only on his cheek but also on his arm, where the little girl also noticed blood. The Duke's maids and servants probably saw him for the first time in such a calm mood that only some little girl had created for him, so there was genuine surprise on their faces. His Majesty, looking at Adele, asked how old his daughter was and what her name was, and the protagonist answered briefly and clearly, adding that she finally wanted to hear her father's name. The Duke introduced himself as Eisen. Eisen said with a smirk on his face that his daughter looked not 9, but at most 5 years old, to which the maids meekly agreed with the Duke, saying, "Yes, your ladyship." Laughing a bit, Eisen said he would go rest due to fatigue after the walk. The maids obediently bowed their heads to him as the Duke walked to the palace. While seeing Eisen off with a look of blue eyes, Adele suddenly remembered that she wanted to ask the knights who had already left about what she wanted to know the night before. But then her intentions were thwarted by Serena chatting with the Archmaid about the main character. Adele assumes Serena likes the Duke, which is why she's bothered by the little girl's appearance at the palace. Yesterday, Serena added that she got a chance after someone disappeared. Adele thinks Chodad still loves a certain mystery girl, and he lost something by becoming a father to her, which saddens her. But despite the complexity of the situation that Eisen, Adele, and Serena are in, the main character can understand Serena and her feelings. Serena caused Adele's deep thoughts to be interrupted as she affectionately called her to breakfast at the palace for the first time. Adele obeyed and followed her, wondering if Serena dreamed of becoming a duchess and how long she would stay here. Thoughts that she was only here for a couple days calmed the protagonist down. For breakfast, along with goldware and exquisite glasses, Adele was brought a mouth-watering fillet steak, which the little girl was delighted with. The chef who prepared the breakfast also said that he added pineapples to his dish, counting on the fact that the main character would like the flavor and get full. Little Adele asked about the fillet, apparently not knowing what it was, but Serena, along with the other maids who were in the room, replied that it was beef. The main character remembered that she had seen in an old book how aristocrats cut off a piece of meat with a knife, so she decided to do the same. Taking the knife in her hands, she cut a small piece off the fillet, then used a fork to put it in her mouth. The chef was really right when he thought that Adele would like the dish, and she did. All the people present were watching carefully as the little girl ate her breakfast sweetly. Adele even wondered if they always did that when someone was eating. After breaking off only a small portion of the already small portion of breakfast with her utensils, Adele stacked the utensils on the table, signaling that she was full. The palace's chief cook asked the protagonist if she had finished her breakfast, marveling that the girl had eaten a very small portion of the dish for her stomach, to which Adele replied that she was indeed full. Not completely convinced that the mistress was full, the chef told Adele that she had only eaten 5 pieces of beef fillet, hinting to eat at least a little more. But one of the servants, who was standing watching the scene, sharply shouted out words to the effect that tiny Adele must eat a balanced diet, or else she would have a hard time due to His Majesty's favor. Presumably, he was referring to Eisen. But in the next moment, the screamer's mouth is shut by another servant, telling him to be as quiet as possible. Ved Eisen could and easily hear, and he's having a long-awaited rest right now. Most likely, little Adele didn't understand the behavior of the 2 servants, so she looked at them with her curious and surprised blue eyes. Serena suggested and served the protagonist to try another dish, stuffed green peppers, but it didn't look quite tasty to Adele, which she said it was. But Serena insisted that the new member of the imperial family try it, because the girl should diversify her diet to be healthy. Through the rebuke, Adele, crooked face, managed to put a piece of stuffed green pepper in her mouth, thinking about how tasty it was and how she didn't really like the color green. The chef snickered and admitted with a smile that he enjoyed watching Adele eat well, calling her Miss. The protagonist took the chef's words as a compliment, causing her blue eyes to sparkle with bright colors of joy. Thinking about the fact that the compliments in his direction should be answered in the same way, the girl said that the chef has a very beautiful hairstyle, even wonderful, to which the chef smiled sweetly. The servants looked at how the girl for their sake tried to eat as much green stuffed peppers as possible, which she does not like, striving to grow up a healthy girl. The next clear day, a red-haired young boy arrived at the palace to join the protagonist, introducing himself to her as Ehin and adding that he would be her personal teacher from now on. Adele gave a modest and cultured nod to her new teacher, saying hello to him. Serena, who had been standing nearby all this time, walked over to Adele and told her that Ehin was a gifted student from the Imperial Academy. Year after year, he gets the highest marks in his exams, which is why he was chosen to be the teacher for the main character. Hearing the words Imperial Academy, Adele once again recalled memories of what her best friend Madeline had once told her about it. She said that the Crown Prince was studying at that academy and she dreamed of going there too. Teacher Ehive says that he immediately came to the palace as soon as he learned that the protagonist was the child of prophecy. It was the first time Duke Azin asked him for anything. Ayan added that Adele could confidently call him her teacher. And for the first lesson, he prepared some simple questions to determine the girl's knowledge. Adele listened to the teacher and nodded silently to all his suggestions, thinking that he was making a good impression on her the first time. The teacher's first question was whether Adele knew any information about the child of prophecy, but the protagonist replied that when she said she could hear spirits, she was immediately called that. Teacher Ehin smiles and says that's right, because Adele is the child of prophecy, appearing for the first time in hundreds of years. Ehin asked if the protagonist knew anything else. The little girl listened attentively to Ian's teacher, but she never heard anything more than the simple 2 words, child of prophecy. The teacher went on to talk about the fact that Adele is not only a child of prophecy, but also the only girl in Duke Alcibiades' family. Ehin asked if the girl knew the duties that were now assigned to her. Adele suggested, with a drop of shyness, that the duties required her to eat right, eat lots of green peppers, go to bed early, and study hard. And with her answer, she puzzled the young teacher who, holding the prepared sheet in his hand, had expected to hear a decidedly different answer. But Teacher Ehin still praised the protagonist for her efforts and serious attitude to her studies, and then asked one last question about whether Adele knew anything about the imperial family. The cute pink-haired girl told the teacher that her best friend had told her about the Crown Prince studying at the Imperial Academy. Ian said that Adele had very good friends if they knew such important information, which the protagonist took as a compliment in her direction and got excited again. After that, the teacher suggested the girl to start learning. Deciding to teach Adele in stages, the teacher chose to start the journey with the most important things such as reading. Placing a book on the table in front of Adele with his index finger, the teacher first showed a line and then told her to read it. But the little girl replied that she couldn't read the line because she couldn't read. In that case, the teacher simply told her to repeat after him to learn at least the name first. Adele begins to read that in the year 818, which is 4 years younger than the main character, Kazmaha Shuga Hasfelt was born in the Empire, with the name of the Empire in his name. Reading the name in the book, little Adele remembered hearing it before. She knows that only members of the imperial family have the name of the empire in their name, which she thought about in passing. She really liked the beautiful name, so excited, she shared her opinion with the teacher with a smile. And the teacher complimented his words by saying that the name belonged to His Highness the Crown Prince, who was currently studying at the academy. The protagonist was shocked by this. She continued to stare at teacher Ahin in amazement and listen to his stories. Ahin said that Kazmaha Shuga Hasfelt would soon become emperor. He is only 12 years old, but there have been cases of emperors becoming emperors at the age of 10. The girl didn't understand much of what the teacher said, so she decided to just memorize his words. She wondered why, when the teacher said that the lesson would begin with the most important thing, he started talking about the prince. Deciding to change the subject, Ehin suggested his student talk about the child from the prophecy. He talks about how it is a unique and precious child, however, not everyone thinks so. The teacher went on to say that there are people in the world who hate the prophecy child for special reasons. Hearing this, Adele got excited and checked with teacher Ehin to see if that was really the case. Ehin said that all his words were true, and for that reason, everyone should keep the main character safe. She should not be left unattended. The teacher also warned that there are people in the world who want to kill Adele. The girl was tormented by one question: why do they need it? The protagonist heard the answer from the teacher that their empire is not the only country on the continent, but the Hasfelt Empire has Adele. With the help of the child of prophecy, any war can be stopped, so the child of prophecy is a symbol of peace. Adele wondered why certain people wanted to kill her. She heard that the empire has been at war with one country for years and wondered, doesn't war only bring destruction and misery? All the children in the orphanage had lost their parents to the war, and little Adele was among them. The teacher asked again if Adele realized how precious she was to the empire. He said that Adele is the chosen one, and she is the person they have been waiting for hundreds of years. The main character is the only hope of ending the war. Adele thought about it and realized the reason why everyone around her had become very good to her. Teacher Ahin ended his story about the child of prophecy by again advising Adele to take care of herself. But the protagonist had a hard time understanding these words. Ahin said that the girl would be able to learn more about the prophecy in the future, as there were more important things to do for now. The young teacher, smiling, informed Adela that a personal guard had been prepared for her. While the student questioned everything she heard, Ahin told her that her guard consisted of knights, whose duty it was to protect her. The protagonist remembered that knights are very important in war, and she was allotted as many as 5. She hopes that Mikael, a guy with violet eyes, will be among them. Still not understanding the meaning of the words, "Take care of yourself," Adele asked Ahin what that might mean to her. The teacher said it was a good question. He informed the girl that she would need to learn a few rules that she should follow in the future. The first rule turned out to be that Adele would now be called a lady, since that was the title that a duke's daughter received. Ahin, holding the quill in his hand, admitted that, not counting the imperial family, it was one of the highest titles. The teacher went on to say that aristocrats can socialize informally with their subjects, for example, with maids, servants, and knights, as it is part of etiquette. Adele realized why everyone reacted strangely when she treated them formally, but it didn't matter to the heroine what they would call her, since she wouldn't be able to get used to the title anyway. The teacher said it would be a good idea to practice and suggested that Adele talk to the maid Serena, who was standing beside her. Upon hearing this, Serena became a little flustered. The first time Adele addressed Serena with the word, "excuse me," but Ian corrected the heroine, saying that etiquette dictated that Adele shouldn't speak like that. Looking at the maid and stammering slightly, Adele embarrassedly called Serena by name. Serena politely responded to Adele, but at this point the main character didn't know what to say to the maid next, continuing to stare at her in silence. Saying the first thing that popped into her head and feeling embarrassed, Adele told Serena to her face that she liked her. Serena looked at the young lady in surprise and asked her if it was true, to which Adele replied that she did. Not really understanding the reaction of the maid, the protagonist thought she was annoying her, and she shouldn't have said that. But Adele realized that she had nothing against Serena, even though she disliked her. What it doesn't mean to the girl is that her attitude should be the same. Teacher Ayan swept up and praised Adele for doing well for the first time. He then, after notifying the heroine that she had learned the 3 most important rules, suggested that she move on to reading the letter, to which Adele readily agreed. Ian, with the help of the same book, thanks to which Adele learned the name of the crown prince, continued to teach the girl to read letters, pointing with his finger to the lines to be read. And at the end of the first lesson, teacher Ihin decided to assign quite a lot of homework that Adele had to do, so she immediately started to do it, taking an ink pen in her hands. But from the lessons, the girl was distracted by the maid Serena, who turned to the heroine on Lady in order to ask something. It turns out that Serena was concerned about Adele's words about the fact that the protagonist liked her, and asked her to say whether the girl really told the truth then, and whether her words were sincere. Little Adele began to answer the maid sincerely. She was asked to say what she wanted to say, so the heroine told Serena that she liked her. The little girl's words made Serena embarrassed without saying a word. After that, the red-haired maid left the study, saying that she would bring the child from the prophecy tea. Adele became sad again, for she thought that everyone around her hated her, including Serena, who suddenly left her to go get tea. But before she opened the door and walked out, Serena stopped and embarrassingly told the protagonist that the tea she would bring was considered the most expensive on the continent. Adele heard this, which made her initially sad mood change to curiosity and joy. She was now looking forward to Serena bringing her the Empire's unique tea. A small green fairy suddenly appeared in front of the girl, having last appeared the night Adele had overheard the maids talking in the hallway. The little fairy asked the main character why she was being so nice to Serena, since the girl knows that the maid was insulting her behind her back. Adele replied to the fairy by saying that she wouldn't have said that if she knew she could hear everything. The green spirit asked the protagonist what she was talking about. The little girl said that in her opinion, Serena didn't mean to insult her. The fairy replied that she even brought the princess to tears with her words, but Adele said, "Mole, all people in life make mistakes." The fairy is interested in Adele's position. She resents that Serena did not even apologize to her, and the girl still forgave her. Adele says that she prefers to forgive rather than hold a grudge. She likes it better that way, which the green fairy once again thinks about. Before disappearing, the little fairy warned Adele that it was not quite right, for she needed to value herself more, but the spirits would always support the girl's choice. Immediately after the green fairy disappeared, Serena entered Adele's office and said that she had brought the promised most expensive tea of the empire, but besides that there was someone else standing next to her. The tall and dressed-up man standing next to Serena was Mikael, with several other knights also standing behind him. As he came closer to the protagonist, he knelt down and introduced himself as Mikkel Battenberg, one of Adele's personal guards. Adele humbly said that she was glad to see this, remembering that she really wanted to see Mikkel in her guard, which he did. After Mikkel's greeting, one of Adele's knights also introduced herself, calling herself Tara Heimadith. The girl knight has bright blue hair like a clear sky. Another guard, who has rainbow coloring on his hair, smilingly introduced himself as Chopin, adding that he's an artist at heart, so if Adele gets bored, she can talk to him like he's the funniest person in the world. As soon as the protagonist saw Chopin, she really liked his rainbow hair, which she immediately thought was adorable. The last knight to give the princess his name was the brunette Rascal, who confessed that he was quite talkative, so Adele could shut his mouth if he was too noisy. Chopin corrected Rascal about it being uncultured and rude to say, "shut his mouth" in front of the princess, causing Rascal and Chopin to jokingly criticize each other in the study, which made Adele realize that they were close friends. The night's conversations were interrupted by another person who came to visit Adele. The blue-haired man with green eyes called himself Fabian, the eldest son of Earl Thatcher. He added that Adele would remember him when she succeeded. Fabian also said that unlike all the knights who showed up here under orders, he is a volunteer. Fabian asked Adele if he knew the difference between a volunteer and a knight, but the princess only remained thoughtfully silent, knowing only what an order was. Serena prompted the girl that a volunteer wanted to serve before being ordered, unlike knights. The girl thanked Serena and Fabian for helping her. When everyone had said their name, the protagonist, sitting modestly and sweetly on a chair for everyone, said her name was Adele Alcibiade, and she was very pleased to meet everyone. Tora, Chopin, and Rascal couldn't contain their emotions when they saw the incredibly cute princess in front of them. Tora covered her mouth with her hands, trying to be cultured in front of the girl. Chopin even admitted that he wanted a little sister like Adele. Mikael interrupted the knights' fun by wanting to inform Adele of a few rules. Mikael revealed that the knights would rotate 3 times a day. Mikael added that if the girl needed to talk and was too shy to tell the knights, Tora was always there to listen to her, because she had a younger sister and knew how to deal with small children. Mikael also advised Adele not to be courteous to everyone, especially people like Fabian, which was a joke. After all, if someone is flattering, the protagonist doesn't need to blindly believe everything. Adele understood Mikael's words, agreeing with him. Noticing that the princess understood everything from the first time, Mikael smiled and asked Adele if she had any additional questions about the topic she was interested in. The girl had a question that she had wanted to ask Mikael when she first arrived at the palace. She was concerned about what she needed to do in order to get closer to her daddy, that is, Duke Eisen, which is what she asked Mikael. The rascal was shocked by Adele's words, because most likely no one had ever asked such questions or asked the knights how to please Duke Eisen. Mikael was also surprised at first, but then said with a smile that the young lady needed to study well for that. Adele, being a curious and sweet child out of habit, clarified from Mikael what exactly he meant by the word study. And while the little girl is debating with the knight about Duke Eisen, Serena serves the protagonist a cup of the most expensive tea in the empire. Knight Mikael tells the curious little girl that the Duke has a rose garden full of books in his castle, and she will definitely bond with him if she studies there, because Eisen loves diligence in his studies. The protagonist memorized Mikael's words as she continued to listen to him. The knight also added that if the little lady would humbly do a lot of homework assigned by her teacher and go to bed early, she would definitely get closer to her daddy. The pink-haired girl exclaimed that she had heard Mikael's advice and would do her best to make sure Duke Eisen was closer to her. Chopin, watching their conversation, was surprised, to say the least, at the rare affection for a child from Mikael, but Tora reassured her mate, saying it was all good. Mikael offered Adele to spend time in the garden, to which the protagonist, smiling, willingly agreed. But before that, she decided to drink a cup of the most expensive tea in the empire, which was brought to her by her maid Serena. After Serena kindly gave the little lady a cup of tea, the girl took the first sip, which at first was bitter, but further the flavor opened up and became brighter. The incredible notes of the expensive tea were very much liked by the main character, which she told Serena. Serena informed Adele that the precious tea was made of golden rhodamine, and the entire kingdom of Beauseine was famous for it. Chopin was very surprised when he heard what the tea was made of. He said that rhodamine was incredibly rare for their empire. After taking just one sip and getting drunk, Adele thanked Serena for such an expensive treat, watching the slight blush of embarrassment protrude on the maid's face. Serena briefly replied that she had done what she had to do. After finishing tea, Adele, accompanied by Serena, Rascal, and Chopin, went out into the garden where the little lady, determined to do her homework, sat at the table learning to write. Teacher Ethan had assigned Adele as homework to learn the 52 letters of the imperial language and their pronunciation, at which the little girl is laboring in the garden. But so far, she doesn't know any letters except those in her name. She has only 47 letters of the alphabet to memorize. The protagonist decides to try to write her daddy's name on paper. Adele, with some pride and joy, picks up the piece of paper with her father's name written on it to show it to Serena to see if she wrote it correctly, which she asks the maid about. Serena notes that Adele wrote it correctly, which makes the little lady very happy. Serena also praises the main character for already being able to put letter words together. But then Serena said that there is one nuance, and that is that the first letter in names should always be capitalized. Adele realized her mistake and quickly corrected it by capitalizing Count Eisen's name below. Serena, again with a kind smile, praised the girl for her efforts, saying that she had done it perfectly. Little Adele continued to sit at the table studying the letters and names of the people important to her. She had already drunk all the tea, but Papa Eisen never came home, which saddened the little girl. The protagonist remembered Mikhail's words that she would get closer to her daddy if she studied well. She wonders if she has already made enough effort, or has she not? Adele realizes that she misses Papa. Rascal, scratching his head, wanted to say something to Adele about what Mikhail had told her, but his speech was quickly cut short when he noticed a familiar person approaching them. This person was none other than Duke Eisen himself, who was walking towards Adele and gracefully adjusting his collar. Adele was both surprised and delighted, as her plan to get closer to her father through her studies had worked. Away from the Duke, the protagonist saw the already native Mikhail, who said with his smile that the girl had achieved what she wanted, which is very commendable. Duke Eisen came closer to the table where Adele was sitting and doing her homework. Keeping his eyes on her, he noticed something on the table that caught his Hergzian attention. His Majesty noticed that almost all of the pieces of paper Adele had were scribbled with his first and last name, which interested him even more. Examining the pieces of paper on the table with a thoughtful face, he asked Adele if they were the ones she had taught him while in the garden. The Duke took one sheet in his hand to answer his own question and look at little Adele's endeavors closer with his angry gaze. After briefly examining the humble work of art, confident words were heard from the smiling Eisen that these newly created letters were quite elegant. Adele was confused when she heard her daddy's slightly odd words, but after a little while she decided to take it as a compliment, for Eisen had said that her written letters were elegant. Watching his daughter write, the Duke noticed the ink from the pen on her face and hands, which he informed her of by pointing to his face as an example. Little Adele became agitated, trying with her small palm to carelessly wipe the ink from her hands. Black stains remained on her right palm. In her haste to wipe her cheek from the ink, with excitement, the pink-haired girl apologized to her new father. Duke Eisen, not understanding his daughter's behavior, asks her what exactly the protagonist wants to ask his forgiveness for. Adele, feeling ashamed of herself, confesses to her father that she wants to ask his forgiveness for having stained her palms and cheeks with ink. Eisen reassures his young daughter that this is perfectly normal for children her age, so she shouldn't worry too much about the ink. The girl, wanting to argue her sloppiness with the ink, exclaimed that she had been studying diligently all this time. Duke Eisen's reaction was mixed. He hesitated and sighed, still holding the sheet on which Adele had written her first words. The protagonist also told her father that she had learned His Highness the Crown Prince's name and the spelling of letters, listened to the prophecies about the child, and memorized the names of her guards. It seems the Duke was slightly surprised to hear so much information, so he decided to praise the main character this time, calling her well done. Little Adele also added to her words that she practiced without any interruptions, ate well, and went to bed early as she was told. Duke Eisen smiled, saying that such a wonderful child like the protagonist had done a very glorious job. Unexpectedly, the Duke sat down at Adele's table, starting to tell her that he too had diligently learned the alphabet as a child. He was 2 years old then. Taking a quill in his hand and preparing to write something, Eisen confessed to Adele that he too would be very happy if his father saw him learning. The protagonist asked him why his father didn't see his efforts. Duke Eisen told Adela a brief story that his father had been rather cold to him and had died early, and Eisen was too young to become the head of the duchy. Adele listened to her dad carefully, memorizing every word. After writing 2 cryptic words on a piece of paper, Eisen addressed Adele by name to say something important. The Duke told the protagonist to memorize the main thing. Nobility entails responsibility. The young princess asked the young Duke in what sense she should understand his words. Drawing a triangle on a piece of paper divided into several parts, the Duke explained to Adele that all people are divided into nobility, class, commoners, and slaves. Complementing the top of the triangle with a drawn crown, the Duke explained that the imperial family was the pinnacle of everything he listed. Eisen went on to explain that in the Hasfelt Empire, the church has no head and the emperor fulfills his duties, but only one being can stand above him. Drawing a peculiar animal with a mane and wings above the crown, he said that this being has the name Shinsu, and Adele is the only person who can stand above this creature. Eisen continued to finish the animal with mane and said that there is a proverb that sounds like, "Above the emperor is Shinsu, and above Shinsu is the child of prophecy." Adele told her dad that she didn't fully understand what Duke Eisen was talking about. Duke Eisen only said that the protagonist would soon be able to figure it out in class. He also added that he had heard from Ehin that her attitude towards her studies was commendable. The young dad praised his daughter for her effort, saying that she is doing well, and at this pace, she should continue studying. Adele noticed again the way Eisen praised her once again. With a smile, the young Duke added his words that the girl only had a month to study, but then the protagonist remembered her bad thoughts. Adele is afraid that after a month of training, she will be sent back to the orphanage. After that, the young father offered his daughter to wipe her ink stains on her body by handing her a handkerchief with the word Biashirta on it. The girl was interested in the word on the handkerchief, which was most likely the name of a person unknown to her. The protagonist was interested in who might have given him this handkerchief. After wiping her hands from the ink, the girl kindly handed the handkerchief to Eisen, thanking him for his help. Adele's dad took the handkerchief, telling the girl in passing that there were quite a few nobles nowadays who were not fulfilling their duties, and it was wrong because they needed to be able to keep their composure. And in an emergency situation, the aristocracy should sacrifice their lives for the slaves and commoners he talked about earlier. Duke Eisen told the protagonist that this is the lot of anyone at the top of the hierarchy who lives in luxury. No one would respect a noblewoman worried only about herself. The protagonist listened attentively to her father and his advice, but the feeling in her head did not fade away, as if she was still a child from an orphanage and not from a wealthy imperial family. The girl realized that her father saw something special in her. Adele told Duke Eisen with determination that she would humbly memorize and perform all the duties assigned to her. Eisen, pulling something out of his jacket with his hand, confessed that he wished he had been told about such things in his childhood. Noticing His Majesty pulling something out of his jacket, Mikael, who had been behind him the whole time, warned that secondhand smoke could harm the child. But Eisen said dismissively that he had already quit smoking. From underneath his suit, the Duke, it turns out, kept not tobacco products, but a red lollipop. Taking it out, Eisen said that there was no way he could give up candy. All the servants and guards, including Adele, Serena, Rascal, Chopin, and Mikkel, watched as His Majesty happily ate the red lollipop. After fixing his jacket and finishing his lollipop, the Duke rose from his seat, apparently about to leave the garden. But Mikhail stopped him by asking if he was really leaving the company. The Duke turned to the knight, questioning what exactly was bothering him about this. Mikhail only pointed a glance at Adele, hinting that there was something to be done with her. The Duke still doesn't understand what exactly the knight is talking about. Eisen noticed that Adele got up from her seat and walked towards him. As she got closer, the protagonist asked that Daddy be more careful and take care of himself. The Duke, thinking that these were supposedly parting words from Adele, said that the girl also wanted him to leave, not realizing the whole situation. Mikael says that's not what he meant when he spoke to His Majesty. The Duke clarifies from him exactly what he meant, still looking at Mikael with incomprehension. But then the smiling protagonist, apparently up to something, asks her dad to hold out his hand to her. At first, Duke Eisen does not understand what his daughter wants, so he asks her questions. The little girl joyfully extends her left hand in front of the Duke, showing how His Majesty should be done. Eventually, the Duke does as the little girl has shown him. He extends his right hand in front of her. Having achieved what she wanted, the little girl simply placed the Duke's outstretched hand on the top of her head. Adele had always dreamed of having a family and wanted to be stroked on the head, for example, for her efforts in her studies, or just for fun. Duke Eisen's face was stunned and shocked by the actions of the protagonist. He silently watched the girl as she enjoyed the pleasure of being stroked on the head. It was much more pleasant for the little princess than she had realized. Tora and Fabian, who had arrived at the garden to change the night's guard, saw the scene and couldn't even believe their eyes. They, too, were overcome with shock. Without delay, Tora lightly stroked Fabian's stomach, hinting and saying that they needed to leave for training right away so as not to embarrass Adele and Eisen with their presence. After the head stroking was over, the Duke lifted his hand from the top of Adele's head and looked at her carefully before asking if she had washed her hair. Adele, thinking she was annoying her father with her obsessive behavior, hesitantly answers him that her hair was clean. Duke Eisen, hearing the answer, unexpectedly places his hand on the little girl's head once more, sweetly saying that his child wants affection. Adele, though she didn't show it, could have flown to the seventh heaven with happiness. After stroking his daughter on the top of her head once more, Isaac wished the protagonist a good night's sleep with an uplifted mood, and Adele wished His Majesty the exact same words. The little lady really remembered the moment when her daddy stroked her on the head. It made her smile, happy, and generally be happier. She was overjoyed for the fact that Violet Eyes, that is, Mikael, had not lied to her, and she was truly able to get close to the Duke. The cheerful little girl, on her way back to the luxurious palace, told her personal maid Serena that she wanted to go to bed earlier, taking Mikael's advice. But Serena politely warned the little lady that she would first draw a bath for her, and after the treatments, the little girl would taste a special dessert that the chief had prepared for her. Therefore, the maid advised Adele not to hurry to go to bed yet. The main character probably heard the word dessert for the first time, so she asked Serena what it was. The maid modestly and with a smile replied that dessert is a sweet and the chef is the cook. Adele is glad that with so much food, she will no longer have to go hungry like she did at the orphanage. The girl is excited about the new edible gift from the palace chief. Serena helped the girl to the bathroom, and then, along with a rubber duck, Adele in a hot bath pondered whether it was normal to be so happy and what if someone took her away from the palace and punished her for being too happy. After bathing and thinking about the future, the little princess sat down to eat at a table decorated with various desserts just for her. Next to her was Serena, watching her with a smile. The little girl watched as Serena and the chief grinned at her, which to the protagonist was incredibly satisfying. Adele recalled seeing the same facial expressions on her parents who were forced to live on the streets. They were happily watching their child eat the food. The little girl's attention turned to the strange rectangular thing that was in the plate next to Adele. Serena explained to the protagonist that the strange dessert she was staring at was called marshmallow and could be eaten with her hands. As Adele continued to stare at the marshmallow, she found it to be something similar to a pillow, as both are soft, white, and cuddly. Having aroused her curiosity, the little girl asked Serena about another shell-shaped dessert, which she was interested in. Serena replied to the child of prophecy that the dessert she was interested in was a traditional Mertz Kormesh dish, a brownie, and it had the name Madeline. Catching an earful of the word Madeline, the little lady remembered her best friend, wondering how she was and worrying about her. Adele thought she would be quickly discarded and see her again. The protagonist is convinced for the umpteenth time that she misses her. The sweet girl decided to tell Serena her worries with a sad reminder that her best friend's name was the same as the name of the delicious brownie. Serena remembered what the main character had told her about in the past, saying that it was her best friend named Madeline who told the little lady about the imperial family. Adele eyed the marshmallow for a long moment, then looked at Serena, plotting something. With the goal of bonding with not only Papa but Serena as well, the little girl told her that she looked a lot like a marshmallow, which confused Serena in the first few seconds. Overhearing the cute confession, Chopin and Rascal, standing behind her, began to whisper amongst themselves about Serena's face and whether it really looked like the marshmallow Adele saw it as. But Serena quickly let them know that it was time to stop joking around, stating menacingly that she was hearing all the gossip from the two guys, calling them fools. The maid, smiling, told the protagonist that she, along with the two boys, fool around quite a bit, which is why they were born with this attitude towards each other, and she shouldn't worry about it. The little heroine, while Serena was talking to the knights, thought about the fact that Serena seemed to like the fact that she was compared to a marshmallow. Adele had heard before that the maids were also from noble families, which must be the reason why the three of them are so close. The girl is burning to be friends with Serena. After saying something to the boys, Serena turned her attention back to Adele, kindly saying that she agreed that her face looked like marshmallow. Rascal saw a certain naivete in the maid's words, which in his opinion was perfectly visible. And little Adele shyly responded to the red-haired maid's words, saying she was glad for it. Serena asked the little girl to eat more, embarrassed by the cuteness and compliments from the little pink-haired wonder, to which the girl readily agreed. As night and darkness fell, Adele was put to bed after a sweet dinner and bath. The girl wishes everyone a good night, to which Serena, Chopin, and Rascal reciprocate. The main character, apparently feeling tired after a long and busy day full of new knowledge, was able to fall asleep very quickly and sweetly. Serena was in no hurry to leave Adele's chambers. She watched her, crouching down next to her on the bed, continuing to admire her beauty and cuteness as if she were a toy. As the morning brightened, the protagonist saw Serena again, who had become near and dear to her. The maid in good spirits informed the girl that there was an extracurricular activity planned for her today. Sleepy Adele, wiping her eyes from sleep, addressed Serena in you and asked if they were going to talk about the Duke again, to which the maid replied that the Duke was not planning to return today and asked the little girl not to speak to her in you, as it was not etiquette. The young princess watched as the other maids opened the curtains in her luxurious bedroom and carried her extra things for her morning care, like a towel. The protagonist began her morning by washing her face. Serena kindly handed her a clean towel, and as the girl wiped her face, her mind played with thoughts about what extracurricular activities awaited her. While Serena was helping the little lady with brushing her hair and dressing her in her new dress, Adele could hear the two maids' assistants debating about which hat would be best for the princess to wear. One of the helpers showed the heroine one of the hats, commenting that it had an uncomplicated design. The maids' assistants were eager to choose a hat for the girl, thanks to which the princess will not get baked in the sun and will not hurt herself. The girl, of course, was interested in the hats, one of which she had to choose, but the girl's curious attention noticed that in addition to her, Serena and the two maids, there were two other people in the room. These people turned out to be Fabian and Mikhail, who were already ready to walk, and were looking at the floor, as they were not allowed to look at the princess until she was ready. Meanwhile, Serena had found a black safety hat for the little heroine that she thought would be more appropriate, one that would keep the girl from hurting herself. Obediently sitting down in her seat, Adele decided to ask Serena what her extracurricular assignment was while she was wearing the hat. Serena told the girl that the extracurricular would be outside, and she would be learning how to ride animals since she would need to ride Shinsu later on. The main character listened attentively to the personal maid. The maid also politely asked the little lady to pretend that it wasn't her, but teacher Ihin, who told her that, as this was one of the most important lessons she would have to learn. The little girl recalls that Duke Eisen had already said the word Shinsu yesterday. He also said that it was above the emperor. The little girl still doesn't realize what's in store for her and who Shinsu is. But while she has never seen or heard of Shinsu, Adele knows the ordinary animals very well. Not only that, but she is incredibly afraid of them, which started back in her childhood. Adele has terrible memories that in times of famine starve not only people, but also animals. The girl has repeatedly seen animals eating human corpses to get enough to eat. The girl remembers witnessing a little boy being attacked by a dog that bit his leg. Adele worries about whether or not she should even go to this class. Meanwhile, Serena, along with the other two maids, discussed buying things for Adele from all the boutiques. The head maid named Noelle gave permission to buy different clothes, giving the girls a good budget. Serena praised her partners for a good job. As the girls continued to talk about what comfortable outfit Adele should wear and whether or not they should wear it at all, Serena noticed that the little princess mood had changed. Something wasn't right. Ordering the girls to be quiet for a while, Serena approached the flustered protagonist and asked her if everything was all right. As soon as Serena stepped closer to Adele, the little girl jumped on her with a hug, which the personal maid was surprised by. The main character, crying, called Serena sister. The little girl hugged the maid tightly, holding back tears and dreading her new riding lesson. Serena wrapped her arms around Adele, smiling at her cuteness. The protagonist enjoyed the hug and felt that no one would give her offense. Having had enough hugs, Serena kindly reassured the girl, telling her that everything was fine, after which, finding a suitable object for her scheme, she gave the little lady a pillow to cuddle her and worry less about riding. Serena was back to the difficult discussion of what safe clothing would be best to offer the heroine. The green-haired maid told Serena that clothes that fit Adele's size would be hard to find, but the personal maid already had an idea in her pocket. The maid found a shirt for Adele that fit comfortably over the heroine's body with buttons, which she told her about, and after her, Serena put a coat on the girl, made, as she said, of tweed. Looking at herself in the mirror, Adele realized that not only her new image looked great, but she was becoming more and more like a real lady every day, not a child from an orphanage. The girl noticed that she arrived at the Duke's palace dirty, and now she cannot even recognize herself in the mirror. Besides the shirt, coat, and hat, the maids also took care of the princess's palms, putting on them black gloves with an interesting emblem, which attracted Adele's attention. Noticing that the girl was interested in the sign, Serena told her that it was a peace sign and it was made by a famous designer named Saralyn. The girl realized that in this magical and majestic palace, even the gloves symbolized something, and it fascinated the young lady. Serena alerted Mikhail and Fabian, who were still standing in the room with downcast eyes, that they had finished dressing and could look at the princess. Mikhail was the first to greet Adele, calling her a little lady. The protagonist said hello to him as well, thinking over the fact that by rule, the guards couldn't even speak to her until she finished her business and addressed them first. Adele loved looking at Knight Mikhail's violet eyes. She still also thought they were incredibly beautiful and unusual. Mikhail helped the little lady down from the carriage after a long and somewhat tiring ride. Fabian stayed close to Mikhail and the little lady the entire time. After getting down to the ground and taking Mikhail's hand, Adele saw an incredibly beautiful green landscape and blue sky and clouds, the charm of which even made her exclaim, "Wow!" Then she asked Mikhail where they were. Mikhail answered the lovely lady that the vast plains that Adele was admiring were also part of the Duke's estate. The girl was surprised, for she had traveled long enough by carriage to arrive here. She is excited by the fact that such a huge estate with a gorgeous palace and plains is, in fact, her home. On the horizon, the protagonist, as well as the others, noticed her teacher Ehin approaching her, leading a large, white, harnessed horse, fully prepared for riding. Ehin, after wishing the girl a good morning, said that today they had an extracurricular lesson in which they would be learning to ride a horse. But Adele, hiding behind Mikhail out of fear, didn't even want to go near the animal, saying a quiet and intimidated, "Okay," to the teacher. The horse looked the most ordinary and obedient, but its every short movement made Adele afraid, because she is terrified of any animal, which is related to her difficult childhood and hunger. Teacher Ehin, not yet suspecting how much the little girl is afraid of any animals, asked her what the reason for her strange behavior was. But the girl, who was still hiding on Mikhail's leg and could barely hold back tears of fear, asked someone to provide her with a smaller horse. Mikhail, realizing the reason for the young lady's fear, said that in the stable there were ponies in addition to the usual horses. But Teacher Ehin added that the white horse he had brought was docile, and the lady would definitely not hurt herself if she rode it. The girl, hiding her face behind Mikhail, said that she would not ride such a huge animal for her because she did not want to. Mikhail understood and said they'd better go to the stables, to which the teacher sighed and agreed. The little lady hid behind Mikhail while Ehin went to the stables. This time he brought a small brown pony, saying that this pony was the smallest of all and the most obedient. But Adele was afraid to even look at the cute little pony that was no taller than herself. When she opened her eyes, the main character started whining about the harmless pony wanting to eat her and that all animals eat people. Fabian, Michael, and teacher Ahin were stunned, to say the least, by the girl's strange words and fear. Ahin began to tell the girl that he would end the lesson immediately and would not force her to learn how to ride a pony just so she wouldn't cry. Teacher Ehin, wanting to stop Adele's tears, even began to apologize to the protagonist for his mistake, saying that such a thing will never happen again, and he was wrong. The girl began to gradually calm down, wiping her tears with her palms and looking at the worried teacher, who could do anything for the sake of the little lady not to cry anymore. Mikhail informs the princess that he, along with Fabian and the teacher, will need to step back and talk for a while, saying lastly that it won't take long. A saddened Adele replied with a short, "Okay." Left alone and sitting down on the grass, the protagonist began to think about how this was the most important lesson for her from Serena's words. But why him, and why did she have to ride a certain shinsu? Adele fleetingly overheard Fabian, Ahin, and Mikhail arguing that a month of training would not be enough for the girl, especially since she is a child of the prophecy. After overhearing, Adele realizes that going to Shinsu is one of her main responsibilities. The girl's worsening mood and sad thoughts are interrupted by an unknown person who approaches her from behind and asks if it was by chance the people talking there that made her cry like that. The girl with tears in her eyes quickly turned around, seeing an unusually handsome, white-haired boy with dark eyes in front of her, wondering if she needed any help. Looking at the mysterious and good-looking boy, Adele thought about his handsome appearance, which she had definitely never seen anywhere else. Adele took off her hat, wondering where this white-haired boy could have come from, but suddenly a fairy-like spirit appeared in front of her, advising her to trust him, for everything would be all right. And Adele heeded this advice. The girl looked at the mysterious boy with her crystal blue eyes, asking him how he wanted to help her. The boy replied that he would help the protagonist in any way he could. Before making her decision, the little lady looked at her knights Mikhail, Fabian, and the teacher who were still chatting away. After making her decision and trusting the spirit, little Adele agreed and held out her hand to the unknown boy, asking him to save her. The boy took the girl's hand and helped her up, looking into her eyes and reassuring her that she had nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, Ahin, along with Fabian and Mikhail, having finished their conversation, moved to look for the little lady who had disappeared from sight, calling her by name and going around every bush and tree. The boy took Adele's hand and led her away from the guards in a hurry, something the protagonist was worried about. She guessed that they were already looking for her, which could create big problems for her and for them. The girl realizes that she ran away from her friends with a boy she does not know and sees for the first time in her life. It is at this moment that she remembers the words of her teacher Ehin that there are people in the world who want to kill her, but the spirit said that the unknown can be trusted and all should be well. After running away from the little lady's seekers, the boy led the girl into a thicket where he stopped, and Adele let herself be exhausted. The mysterious boy put his index finger to his lips, hinting for the protagonist to be quieter. And Adele, just looking at him, thought again about how handsome he was. The pair continued to hold hands, though they were no longer running. Looking into his black-gray eyes, the little lady asked him if he was a servant, before politely apologizing. The girl thinks he's a servant because of his good looks, which almost all servants in the palace of noble descent have. Sensing the aura of an aristocrat from the boy, the white-haired stranger replied that he was indeed a servant. The boy also asked the protagonist why she was only asking about it now. As she continued to stare at the unknown handsome man and wonder if he was really a servant like he said, the girl didn't notice the boy let go of her hand at first. Adele felt that his hand was quite warm, after which she finally asked the boy what his name was. The white-haired boy who called himself a servant introduced himself with the name Kahan, which instantly reminded the protagonist that she had heard that name before, but where exactly? Kahan said that the girl could just call him Khan, to which Adele said that it was a beautiful name too. The pair walked down the path, talking amongst themselves. Kahan was still curious about the reason why the little girl was crying sitting on the grass, so he asked Adele about it. The girl confessed that animals were very scary to her, and adults made her ride ponies. Adele continued that she didn't know anything about Shinsu and probably wouldn't understand even if it was explained to her in detail. Because of that, the girl confessed to Keihan that she feels stupid. It also scares her to be told that it's all just for a month, assuming she'll be sent back to the orphanage. Kahan began to realize that the little lady was worried about the future. He asked if there was anything else she wanted to tell him. Adele told Keihan that she is scared. She is happy, but she feels that it could all end and she thinks she will be abandoned, turned away from her, after which she will lose everything. Adele thanked the boy for listening to her. Han heard Adele's gratitude, saying it was okay. Walking beside the protagonist, he confessed that he didn't think it suited her to be a real lady. The girl, hearing such words, stood in front of Keihan, waving her hands and talking about how everyone is actually very nice to her. She enjoys chatting with Serena. The guards are also quite kind to her. Adele said that they are all amazing people. The boy countered the girl that these same people brought her to tears and left her alone, and it was their job to keep an eye on Adele for a second. Then Kahan remembered himself, who had only taken the girl's hand and run away. Then the young man realized what a mistake he had made. Keihan, realizing what a mistake he had made in saving the little girl from the guards, decided to say a quick goodbye to the protagonist, saying that he had urgent business to attend to. He might be found soon, too. But the little lady did not let the boy who saved her from the nights leave, grabbing his hand and begging him to stay with her. Adele is burning to walk with him longer. Holding the boy's hand, Adele thought about the fact that she had probably made a friend, and if she went back now, she probably wouldn't be punished. Han stopped and questioned the protagonist about what he was going to do with her next. Loosening her grip, Adele told Han that she really wanted to hear his story. Khan began to tell about being forced to get married and preparing for it. He also said that Adele, as an aristocrat, would also have to get married someday. But the little girl, upon hearing this, sadly said that she wanted to continue living with her father. Khan swept up and said that the protagonist talks just like a child, to which Adele replied that she is a child now, which should not be surprising to him. The girl revealed that she really wants to get closer to her father, as she knows that he likes to study hard. Adele admits that she's never had a heart-to-heart talk with him, and she's also still curious about who Surtha is. Han marveled as if he knows the person to whom the given name belongs. Adele also added to her story by saying that the name was written on the handkerchief her father had given her the day before. Keihan pondered over whether or not to tell the protagonist about the mysterious name. Then he himself asked Adele if she wanted him to tell her about this curious secret. The protagonist was pierced with surprise when she heard that Keihan knew to whom the name belonged. Khan said that he could show a place nearby that would give the girl the answers to all her questions. So of course she asked the white-haired boy to show it to her. But before moving somewhere, the protagonist asked a simple but very interesting question about whether they were now friends. Adele recalled that Madeline's best friend had once told her that age was no barrier to friendship, even if Madeline was a year older than her. The girl remembered this moment very well, which influenced her worldview. Han didn't want to upset the naive girl, so he told her that from that moment on they were friends. The boy took the girl's hand again and led her to the place he wanted to show her when Adele talked about Surtha. Walking through thickets, they came to a beautiful mansion. It seemed more and more to the protagonist that the Duke's palace was huge to a size she couldn't even imagine. In addition, the girl felt like a heroine of some fairy tale, where the road to Bisir is like a knight's adventure. Tired of walking, the girl covered her face from the sun with her hand, asking Khan how much longer they had to walk. Adele noticed that Keihan was not as tired as she was. Keihan turned to the main character and said that they were almost there, they just needed to be a little patient. This made the little girl happy. Adele girl's efforts were not in vain because Keihan led her to a mysterious white building. Khan pointed his finger at it and said it was called the Shinsu Blessing. Adele noticed that the suspicious white lion statue, though it wasn't alive and didn't move, was still somehow watching her, which made the girl feel uneasy. The girl was able to open the tall doors of the Shinsu Blessing building and go inside, probably expecting to see an ordinary hallway with stairs or an ordinary corridor, but what she saw was neither. Before the girl appeared a portrait of extraordinary beauty with golden frames and bright colors, which depicted a woman with a duke who holds a strand of her blonde hair near his heart. The protagonist was incredibly surprised by the size of the painting. As she looked closely at the woman in the portrait, she noticed that she looked happy. The little lady continued to admire the painting, noting to herself that the couple in the portrait looks beautiful and they look good together. The painting radiates happiness and warmth, which the little girl felt with her soul. The little girl learns that the beautiful and memorable name Beasirta belongs to the woman in the painting, who has unusual golden hair and green eyes. Looking at the exquisite painting with golden frames, one can easily realize that the couple is happy with each other, which is also felt by the main character. The girl thinks that she is very happy that her father has such a man with whom he can be so happy. Meanwhile, the white-haired boy also decided to take a closer look at the painting with the protagonist, approaching her and looking at the portrait with angry eyes. Adele took advantage of the moment and said she wanted to ask Keihan something, and the boy looked at the little lady kindly, wondering what exactly she wanted to ask him. Still admiring the painting, Adele asked Keihan why this place was called by such a strange name like Shinsu's Blessing. Keihan, looking at the portrait of the couple, began his story by saying that Shinsu loved the first duke more than the first emperor. He also continued his story by saying that when the empire was founded, even the imperial family did not receive Shinsu's blessing. Keihan said that was the reason why there were no guards or people at all around this building. Only the duke and his successor can open the dragon blessing. The white-haired handsome boy went on to tell the protagonist that of course there are exceptions, and there is no place in the empire where a child of the prophecy cannot go. The little aristocrat also advised Adele not to be afraid of Shinsu, even though she's afraid of absolutely all animals due to the fact that she saw them attacking people as a child. The protagonist, listening intently, clarified to Keihan that it was because she was a child of the prophecy. To which Keihan answered her without question and firmly that it was, and she was telling the truth. Little Adele began to remember that if her existence alone can stop the war, then does that mean Shinsu will obey her? And if that's the case, she needs to find out how to handle Shinsu and if she can even do it. After a long and awkward silence in front of the painting, the white-haired aristocrat dared to tell Adele the truth that she would never be abandoned again, something she constantly thinks about. Keihan also complimented that the imperial family would simply not allow the duke to do that, yes, and he himself had no plans to abandon the protagonist and surrender her back to the orphanage. Turning to face Adele, Keihan told the little girl that no one would abandon her anymore, and it sounded like a long-awaited promise for the protagonist. The protagonist listened very attentively to her new friend, as he added to his words that the little girl would always be the daughter of the duke. The little girl did not react in any way to such sensitive words for her, but from them tears began to pour from her eyes, because of which the young aristocrat asked her if she was going to cry. The protagonist told her new friend that she wasn't crying while looking at him with tear-stained blue eyes. Keihan called the young lady a crybaby with slight displeasure, not realizing that the girl had just realized that she was not going back to the orphanage and would not be abandoned again. Keihan became the first person who told her such precious and long-awaited words. The girl asked the boy not to comfort her, as she had tears of happiness, not grief, and also added that she would soon calm down. The boy, without any hatred, told the young lady not to hold back her tears anymore and cry as much as she wanted. Adele realized that the duke would definitely never leave her, but she thought, what would she do with the friends she had left behind when she left the orphanage? Would the girl never see them again? But most importantly, would she ever see her best friend Madeline, whose looks and voice she still remembered? Adele reassured herself that her own Madeline would be happy for the happy live-in Adele, even if they couldn't see each other. Staring at the main character, the boy decided to continue talking about the portrait, saying that it was the only portrait of Beasirta, as there were no others like it anywhere else. Keihan, admiring the painting, like Adele, said that he knew this because of rumors and, like Adele, was seeing Beasirta for the first time in his life. The girl Adele, as befits a young child, was curious as to why Beasirta was nowhere to be found and where she was now. To which Khan looked at the girl and told the shocking news to the protagonist that Beasirta was cursed and chained in ice forever. He also added to his words that if that hadn't happened, she would certainly be a mom to little Adele. The protagonist, after hearing such important and significant information, asked Keihan if it was really as she said. Keihan again told the protagonist that he was not lying to her and everything was as he said. He told Adele that Beasirta would not return to the family and the Duke again unless some sort of miracle happened. Adele continued to admire the portrait of the once happy ducal couple, wondering and pondering what could have happened between Biasirta and Duke Eisen. While Adele, along with her new friend Kehan, was learning the soul-stirring secrets of the imperial family and her father back at the palace, Headmaid Noelle was already concerned about the little lady's long disappearance. She asked Mikael and Fabian where she was, but the two knights did not know the answer to that question. Carefully searching every corner where they had last seen Adele, they still hadn't found her, arriving at the palace without the little lady, for which they were ashamed and only looked shyly at the floor. Serena, who had already grown fond of the girl, seemed to be the most concerned of all present. She also asked the knights where she had disappeared to, but she didn't hear an answer. Master Ehan was the first to tell the worried ladies that it was his fault the girl was missing. He complimented, saying that the lady disappeared after a riding lesson, and he didn't think she was much afraid of animals. Knight Mikael lowered his head and eyes and apologized to everyone present for such a grave mistake that was their fault. The headmaid Noelle reacted with displeasure at Mikael's words of forgiveness. Chopin, Tora, and Rascal, who were also present at this shocking moment, didn't even know how to react. Their faces were painted with fear, worry, and shock at the same time. But suddenly, the sad mood flying in the palace was interrupted by someone loudly opening the door in front of the knights and maids. This formidable person turned out to be Duke Eisen, who was also already informed by the terrible disappearance of his daughter in the palace. Standing in front of the maids and knights, he angrily ordered to find his daughter immediately. In order for the little lady's guards not to relax and languish with the search, the Duke looked at everyone with a vicious and penetrating gaze of red eyes, shouting for Adele's guards to start searching immediately. Meanwhile, the little lady in the Shinsu blessing listened attentively to Han's story about Basirt and shrieked joyfully at the boy's question that her mother could be saved. Han, piercing the girl with his black eyes, calmly confirmed to the protagonist that it was quite possible. Adele couldn't stop thinking about her mom. At this point, the young boy decided to tell Adele a short story from the past. He said that it happened during the war. And during the war, this sad incident further spoiled the already bad relationship between the Duke and the imperial family. An incredible curiosity awoke in the girl when she realized, at Kehan's suggestion, that the relationship between the imperial family and the Duke was already not good at that point, so she asked him about it. Khan did tell the protagonist that their relationship was bad from the beginning and that the girl got it right. Adele understood why she felt that the Duke's men, whether they were maids or others, didn't like the imperial family very much. Adele's black-eyed friend continued to babble that before talking about their relationship, they should remember a certain legend about the first rulers. The legend in question is the story of Shinsu, the first emperor and head of the duchy. There was a one-sided feeling of jealousy, reticence, and suspicion between the Duke and the emperor. Kehan joked that their relationship was more like a love quarrel or a love triangle. The boy asked the little lady if the words he was saying were too complicated for her, but Adele just stood there and couldn't really understand what triangles Kehan was talking about. Deciding not to burden the girl, Kehan briefly concluded his story, saying that the protagonist would be able to learn the details about it soon. But the little girl didn't want to waste time and information from someone as important as Kehan, so she asked him to explain the relationship between the emperor and the Duke now. Kehan said that for now it was enough for the girl to know only that Beasirta, the possible mother of the protagonist, was encased in ice and cursed. The girl realized that there was nothing she could do for the Duke and Beasirta right now, even though she knew what had befallen her. Adele told her white-haired friend about the experience, that being cursed must be painful, and the Duke must be very sad right now. Adele questioned why he was still single. The main character understood and said that to the unhappy Duke Eisen, no one can replace the beautiful Beasirta because she is the only one like that in the whole world. Kehan told the little girl that she thought rightly about Eisen's grief and Beasirta's curse. The little girl has a desire to save her mom from the curse, but since she doesn't have the ability to do it now because she is small and weak, but the heroine strongly wants her dad to be happy. Also, the protagonist madly wants that she, like all children, had a mom and a full-fledged family like happy children in this world. After thinking about it, the girl comes to the conclusion that she wants everything to be just fine and that she doesn't ask for too much. Kehan, wanting to calm the little girl from sad thoughts and worries for the family, tells her that he understands her feelings, as if he has read the main character's mind. Adele begins to realize that if Papa could, he would have saved Beacirta a long time ago, but if the Duke, one of the strongest men on the continent, hasn't done it yet, then it's quite difficult. Even if Han says that she can only be saved by a miracle. Han abruptly interrupted the girl's deep thoughts, saying that he wasn't saying that saving Beacirta was impossible. The girl cheered up when she heard her new friend say that she had a small chance of bringing Beacirta back to life after all, and she asked Kahan about this method. Kahan firmly told the girl with the proverb of the imperial family that the child of prophecy is blessed by the god and that nothing is impossible for the child of prophecy. The girl, not expecting that she would be the kind of person who could do what was practically impossible, clarified with Kahan whether this was true, to which Khan once again confirmed his words and told the little girl that all his words the protagonist can believe. Kahan also added his truthful words that if you put an ordinary person in ice, he will die, but with Shinsu it will be different, and only the child of prophecy, that is Adele, would be able to ride him. The handsome boy was bringing his conversation to the point that if the protagonist could talk Shinsu into it, she could save Beacirta and make Daddy happy. Adele, whose thoughts were already focused only on Beacirta, the Duke, and the Shinsu, asked her new friend a rhetorical question, saying that only she could save her father's beloved. The girl, whose soul was overflowing with the desire to make the Duke and Beacirta happy, and with perseverance and motivation, gave Kahan a promise that she would work hard for her new goal. The protagonist realized that Serena was right when she told her at the beginning of the day that horseback riding would be the most important lesson for her, and if she tried hard enough, she could save her mother who was chained in ice. The overjoyed girl confessed to Han that it was just incredible, and that when they were together it was as if she could do anything, meaning difficult, heroic deeds. Han took the main character's words as a compliment and was a little embarrassed, replying that it was true and the girl didn't think so at all. At this point, a green spirit suddenly appeared in front of the little lady and advised the girl to trust Han one last time. Adele smiled at him like her best friend. The cute spirit flew up to Adele's face and started hugging her cheek, which made the girl start smiling and happy even more. Han noticed the cute and small green spirit with surprise and asked the main character if it was a spirit. The little lady continued to rejoice at the kind and affectionate spirit hugging her cheek and replying to Kahan that he thought right. Kahan put his hand to his chin, examining the spirit and as if in thought, and asked Adele if she had already mastered a certain ring spell. It was the first time the little girl had heard such a strange concept as ring spell, so she simply replied that the spirits appeared and disappeared in front of her by themselves. And to cheer Kahan up, the protagonist said that even spirits love Han. The cute green spirit also looked at Khan and nodded, agreeing with Adele. Kahan, curious about the spirit, leaned closer to it to scrutinize it closely. He said he would never have thought of the spirits liking him, not finishing the sentence because of his curiosity about the spirit. Adele also said it was true, admitting that it was the spirit that told her that Kahan could be trusted. The little boy didn't expect to hear such a thing from a girl. He asked if the spirit had really told her that, to which Adele said a confident yes. Kahan, embarrassed by Adele's frank words and the fact that he was entrusted by the spirits with a little girl, realizing that he might have more trouble on his hands than he had originally thought. The little white-haired boy decided to remind Adele that the knights must have been searching for her and couldn't find a place to go, hinting that it was time for them to say goodbye. The protagonist was worried about Kahan, asking him if he would get in trouble for her. Khan replied to the girl that she shouldn't worry about him at all, as he would be fine. He said he was more worried about the protagonist than himself. The white-haired handsome man, after remaining silent for a while, decided to extend his palm to the little lady and offer her a little walk. Leaving the Shinsu Blessing building, Kahan led the little girl to a tree under which was a magic circle of beautiful blue color. Kahan said that if the girl waited here, the Duke himself would come to her. But the boy also warned that if the protagonist wanted to step out of it, or did so by accident, her daddy would not be able to come. The sweet girl, hearing such a simple scheme to reunite with her beloved daddy, was surprised to be glad. And instantly becoming almost in the center of the magic circle, the protagonist thought that now she would never leave it until she saw her daddy. Kahan marveled at Adele's insistence on being reunited with the father she loved so much. He smiled as he admired the pink-haired girl in the blue circle. But suddenly the little lady, looking at Kahan with heavenly eyes, confessed to him that she had a desire to take another walk with him. The handsome boy with a serious face only replied to let Adele tell him when she wished to see him. Shyly, little Adele replied that she was burning with desire to walk with him tomorrow, as soon as her lessons with teacher Ehan were over. Kahan told the protagonist that she needed a break from her adventures, and then asked if Adele's room was on the 5th floor, in a building the color of seafoam. Without waiting for an answer from the young lady, the handsome boy simply told Adele to leave the window of her room open, and then he would come to her. The girl was confused to hear such words from Han, so she warned him then the knights would guard her room, keeping an eye on her. The white-haired boy calmly told the worried protagonist that he was well aware of this and that he was stronger than them. The stunned girl, her mouth hanging open in surprise, thought that he was stronger than even Mikhail, whom everyone called Mad Dog because of his strength. Kahan had already said goodbye to the protagonist and was leaving, saying that he would see her later, but the girl could not accept that Khan, according to him, was very strong. Adele thought that Kahan had appeared as suddenly as he had disappeared, leaving her alone in an unknown frequency and ordering her to stand in a magic circle to be found. And the situation reminded the girl of her very first encounter with a magical spirit. That important day turned out to be a bad day for little Adele, because at the orphanage she washed a blanket that had not had time to dry outside. But suddenly a fire spirit in the form of a cute lizard appeared right in front of her and offered the girl his help with a smile. The fire spirit with his magic was able to instantly dry the wet blanket of the girl Adele, because of which she was sad all day long. The girl, holding the amazing fire spirit in the palms of her hands, thanked him with joy and a smile for his help. The fire lizard replied that the girl could consider her her friend, but she must not tell everyone about her, not even her best friend Madeline. This happened 4 years ago, but the little lady still vividly remembers the first encounter with the magical spirit who helped her with the blanket. The girl also had questions in her mind about how Kahan knew so much information about the Duke, the Beesert, the Child of Prophecy, and the Shinsu. She wanted to get to know him better. Still waiting for Duke Aizen in the magic circle, which she missed greatly, the girl lay on the ground in exhaustion, letting herself rest for a while. But after a while, the little lady heard adult footsteps approaching her through the garden thickets. The girl was already falling asleep when the footsteps of the unknown stepped closer and closer to her. She paid attention to them and heard them, but from fatigue, she could do nothing more. And then a mysterious man approached the little girl resting under a tree and stopped right in front of her. The mysterious man turned out to be Aizen, who had also advanced to search for his daughter in addition to the knights. He grabbed his head with one hand and sighed, feeling fatherly relief. Adele, hearing the presence of someone in front of her, opened her eyes. Aizen sat down in front of the girl, folding his knees and thanking God for being able to find his missing daughter. As soon as the little lady opened her eyes and saw her daddy who actually came to her, she became upset, wanting to bond with him quickly. The cute little girl with pink pigtails hugged her daddy, resting her head against his chest, causing Duke Aizen to be in slight amazement. The little lady felt very warm and continued to enjoy her father's warmth, not intending to go anywhere. The Duke, still confused, called Adele by name, about to tell her or even reprimand her, but the little girl did not react in any way to her father's words. The Duke admitted to himself in his voice that he couldn't even be mad at his sweet daughter, and Adele thought that if she could get close to her daddy, she would ask him to play with her. From her memories, Adele remembers that she always envied the village children who had fun with their parents. They were very different from the orphanage children that Adele was with Madeline. The little lady remembers that such children were always groomed and surrounded by love. They cheered and laughed as they walked down the streets with their parents. They were also ranked higher in status than Adele and always knew more than she did. The parents of these children always forgave them for any misbehavior, which was often unfair and wrong, especially to Adele and Madeline. Adele would have continued to recall the bad events of her life in the orphanage if her father, who had hugged the girl until now, had not said how much he was worried about her. Duke Aizen added, Maul was already afraid he was going to lose the young lady, and Adele thought she was ready to accept being abandoned again. Daddy continued to hug little Adele, who finally realized that she was wrong for always thinking that she would be abandoned. She really enjoys hugging the Duke and is glad that Daddy is worried about her. The main character also wishes her daddy would let her do some pranks. The girl thinks that she would be even better if she had a full family. All this is because Adele wants to be happy. The girl Adele realized that she loves Duke Aizen because he is her father. Feeling warm and enjoying the hug, the girl called him Daddy. Adele thinks that if she were to admit honestly, it was something she desired even more than the head stroking. She was afraid of being abandoned, but now she wants to call the Duke Papa and save Beacertha, whom he loves so much, so that she can have a mommy. While Adele was immersed in her thoughts, Eisen sat in shock at the little girl calling him Daddy. He checked with her to see if she had actually said that cherished word just now. Only when her daddy asked her about it did the little girl realize that she had unknowingly called the Duke Daddy, which also caused a shock to appear on her face. It was a big shock to the girl for the reason that she didn't know what to say to the Duke or what to do at all, stopping the hug and panicking a bit. But Duke Eisen pulled his daughter close to him again, admitting to her for the second time that he was very worried about her. The lovely daughter and her father hugged each other, after which Duke Eisen said that they should return to the palace. Upon arrival home, Adele was already waiting for Mikkel and Fabian, who confessed to the main character that they were very scared for her. Fabian also added that despair overwhelmed him when they couldn't find the girl. Also, Teacher Ian apologized to Adele for continuing to bring horses even though the girl said she was afraid of them. The protagonist, in an effort to reassure her worried teacher, told him that it was okay. Teacher Ahin also told the girl to forget about what had happened today and warned that they would no longer hold lessons with animals, practicing only in the palace. The girl thought about the words of her teacher because she realized that it would be very useful for her in the future. Knight Mikkel also added to the teacher's words that they will not say even a word about any animals anymore. The protagonist said that if it was the smallest horse, she would be able to ride it. She also promised that she would no longer cry and run away. But the girl, who had a lot of motivation born in her soul, shyly told everyone that she was fine and that she could handle everything because she remembered the words of her new friend Han, who told her that she could do anything. Little Adele is convinced that she, Mommy, and Daddy can live happily ever after if she can do everything. Teacher Ehan smiled at the girl's words, saying that the lady had changed a lot. Cheerful Chopin decided to interrupt the serious conversation by sharing his emotions about whether his friends had seen the Duke's face, which he thought was very funny. With a stern face, look, and voice, Chopin portrayed the Duke as he angrily ordered the knights to find his daughter. Chopin turned to Rascal and said that the Duke had a very angry look on his face, but he immediately cheered up when the knights found the girl Adele. Rascal, unlike Chopin, remained serious. The knight with rainbow hair with a smile asked Rascal why he was not amused, because it seemed that because of his daughter the Duke would lose his mind. But the usual conversation between the two knights was interrupted by Adele, who, hearing their chatter, was surprised that her father, in conversation with someone, called her his daughter. The little girl felt happy to know that her daddy was calling her his daughter after all. Chopin admitted that it was the first time he had seen Duke Eisen so scared and excited about his daughter's disappearance. The rascal also added that this had never happened even after His Majesty had lost battles, which was surprising. Little Adele was pleased to know her father's real relationship with her and how worried he really was about her. Feeling that the situation had found a good ending, the little girl thanked everyone and apologized for causing trouble. But then Tora came up to her and said, could she hug the lady just once? Tora said she couldn't hold back any longer from hugging the little girl. Little Adele reached out her arms to Tora and hugged her, causing the night girl to be surprised and blush at her cuteness. Adele silently hugged Tora, thinking to herself that if hugging a non-native person is so nice, what is it like to hug her own mother? The girl knight Tora, hugging the sweet girl, confessed that she could now die without any regrets. Night was gradually falling over the Duke's palace, which meant that Adele needed to go to bed and rest after her hard and interesting adventures. Serena was putting Adele to bed, but noticing that the little girl couldn't sleep, she suggested that she read a book to her. Adele agreed and said that good children go to bed early according to Mikhail. Adele also said that if Serena was next to her, she could fall asleep quickly. The maid, not understanding Adele, asked her why she continued to believe Mikhail unconditionally, since he dared her to lose it in class today. And the little girl, who was already drifting into sleep, answered Serena that he had violet eyes and they never lie. Serena questioned the little girl if she really believed Mikhail just because he had violet eyes, and the main character replied that she did, adding that he was kind in his own right. Serena couldn't believe it and was a little resentful that she lost out to purple eyes. Serena also told Adele that Thora had organized a fan club for her in her honor, and she knew that Thora would organize something like that for her. Serena added that this fan club already has 10 members. Adele didn't answer anything to the personal maid because she was already drifting into sleep. Then Serena decided to start reading her a fairy tale that long ago there lived a kind little girl born in a noble family. But suddenly the maid hears Adele calling her name in her sleep, and for some reason saying that the Duke is too old for her because Serena is precious. After the girl falls asleep, she dreams that she is living in the orphanage with her best friend Madeline, asking her if she wants to play classics this time. But Madeline replies to Adele that she wants to draw pictures, to which the protagonist replies that they don't have crayons at the orphanage. Suddenly, in her dream right next to her, she hears a familiar voice saying that she will draw Shinsu for the protagonist. Turning her head, Adele notices next to her Keihan, whom she met during the day. He holds a blue pen album in his hand to show the girl his drawing of Shinsu. The protagonist notices that the spirits are very fond of Hana. Adele has never seen so many spirits near Madeline. The feet are almost sticky to Khan. Keihan, with a quill in his hand, was concentrating on drawing Shinsu in a red book for the girl as Adele watched the whole process intently. The little girl saw her new friend drawing a realistic and beautiful lion with a lush mane on a blank sheet of ink. Suddenly the girl felt someone's hand on the top of her head, which interrupted her harmless observation of Keihan's drawing, and she also heard that Serena was still reading her a story, continuing that there was a young man who secretly loved a kind noble girl, and she was loved by many, for she was popular. Little Adele dreams that Serena is reading her a story from a book sitting under a tree, and the man who put his hand on the top of her head turned out to be her daddy, who confessed that he was worried about her. The protagonist was happy to hear such kind and warm words from her daddy in her dream. She felt herself a loved and happy child. But then she saw something that made her shift her attention to another person who was also standing next to them. The person who strongly caught Adele's attention was Sir Knight Meikle, who was crying for a reason unknown to the girl. Adele wondered to herself, why was he crying? The girl looked at her favorite knight's violet eyes for the umpteenth time, convinced that they were beautiful even when he was crying. But before she could admire the knight's violet eyes, the girl noticed that she suddenly found herself in a building called Shinsu's Blessing. And this time she wasn't there with her best friend Keihan, because little Adele saw a beautiful blonde woman in a long blue dress in front of her, who asked if the main character was Adele, to which the girl answered yes. Looking at the beautiful blonde, Adele recognized her as Beasirta, the girl who is shown in the portrait with the Duke and who is a mother to her. Beasirta fell to her knees in front of the little girl and embraced her warmly, which made Adele moved and almost let a tear fall. During the sensual embrace, she heard her mother's magical voice telling her that she wanted to see her. Meanwhile, Adele's personal maid, Serena, had already finished telling the little girl a story and left her bedroom when she fell asleep, pacing quietly down the hallway. As Serena became more and more immersed in her thoughts, she suddenly remembered her horrible memories of the past, the time when an unknown man armed with a long sword wanted to kill her. The unknown man swung his sword at Serena, wanting to take her life for himself. Serena squeezed her eyes shut in fear, but a moment she never expected happened. Duke Azin appeared like a thunderbolt and protected Serena from death and avenged the death of her entire family. Serena walked away from Adele's room, immersed in her thoughts and talking to herself. That she loves the Duke is true, but it's not just an immature and naive feeling. Maid Adele certainly wants to increase her rank, but there is some difficulty. The realization that the Duke is stronger than she is gives Serena a certain pleasure. But at this point, Serena remembers the little lady's words that have gotten deep into her soul. As she fell asleep, Adele told Serena that she was precious. Serena paused, muttering in her mind that she knew it. The red-haired maid then knocked on one of the palace's many doors to enter the room. In a room with high ceilings and beautiful windows stood Duke Eisen and Knight Mikhail, who were talking to each other. Serena still kept thinking, remembering that the Duke had never been interested in other women besides Beasirta. Mikhail, talking to His Majesty, noticed Serena entering the room, but the maid didn't pay much attention to it, starting to do her duties. Duke Eisen was talking to Mikhail, holding a cigar in his hand and looking at his subject with an angry look. Eisen said that the knight was spewing so much nonsense that he couldn't make sense of it. While Serena poured tea into mugs as befitting any maid, Guard Mikhail told the Duke that the crown prince they were talking about was here. Eisen, disliking him, asked Mikhail what better thing to say to the fool who had run off with her daughter. Mikhail gently countered the Duke that Crown Prince Kahan was just interested in who would become his wife, to which the angry Azin, holding a cigar in his mouth, sarcastically replied that that was all Khan wanted, hinting that he didn't believe him. But the calm knight Mikhail said again that Adele had cried when Kahan found her, and then the prince himself had calmed her down. Serena poured flavored tea into cups, listening to their conversation and thinking about the fact that the Duke had stopped smoking after losing Biasirta. But why exactly did he decide to smoke now? Hearing Mikhail's interesting words about Prince Kahan being able to calm a crying Adele, the Duke asked if he was planning a private meeting, to which the knight replied that he was. Duke Eisen decided to go to meet the prince after all and went to the room where the prince was already waiting for him. Mikhail stood next to the door, and Serena prepared to go and serve the aristocrats tea. As Duke Eisen entered the room, he saw Kahan sitting in a chair, looking at and touching the plant next to him. Eisen called him Crown Prince. Kahan's gaze was serious as the Duke started a conversation with him. Eisen said that he himself had requested a meeting with him, and now he wouldn't even deign to look at the Duke. Hearing this, the Crown Prince threw a piercing, malicious look at Duke Eisen with his black eyes. Maid Serena served a tray of tea to the aristocrats on the table, thinking to herself that Kahan was absolutely not afraid of the Duke, even sitting across from him. It was evident from his demeanor. With a nonchalant face, serving each of them a mug of fragrant tea, Serena pondered that Kahan was quite young, but he would soon become a predator ruling a huge empire. After Serena had completed her duties, she modestly informed Kahan and the Duke that she was leaving, heading for the exit and letting the boys talk in private. Knight Mikhail, who continued to stand on the other side of the room, helped Serena out, holding the door for her. The personal maid, Adele, was about to go off to do other duties, but Mikhail decided to tell her the bitter truth that she would not be able to be together with the Duke. No matter how much she didn't want to, Eisen would always love Biasirta. Serena walked further down the hallway, replying to Mikhail that she wasn't planning on building anything with the Duke either. The white-haired knight was surprised by her words. She walked down the hallway with a smile, remembering that she was precious. These words were what the small and sweet young lady had said to her today. Adele woke up in a good mood for the morning, assuming she was dreaming something good, since she didn't remember anything. But right after saying that, the first thing she remembered in her dream was Han drawing Shinsu for her in a sketchbook. In the little lady's bedroom, a cheerful Serena was already there, checking with the girl to see if she was awake. Sweet Adele looked up at Serena, wiping her sleepy eyes with her hands. She replied to Serena that she had gotten a good night's sleep. Looking at her, Adele noticed the maid's puffy eyes. This alerted the protagonist as she assumed that Serena had been crying. Meanwhile, Serena, whose face brightened with a smile, moved closer to the young lady, informing her that she had an important guest today. Adele was interested in this, asking the maid about him. And Serena answered her with a smile that her guest had been adopted at dawn and would be the heir to the duchy. It only took the little girl to hear the word adopted to rise briskly and instantly out of bed with curiosity and interest in her new guest. Adele, her soul overflowing with emotion, asked Serena if it meant she had a new relative at dawn. Serena, who always answered the little girl's questions, said that it did, and the mysterious guest was now a brother to Adele. The little girl sat on the bed in good amazement, happy that her family was growing every day, and today it was joined by a brother for her. The protagonist, apparently to make sure of the reason for her joy, asked Serena again if the guest was really going to be her big brother. To which the kind Serena said yes, also adding to her words that Adele and her brother would be introduced tonight at the dinner, and the Duke would be there too. Adele thought it was too early and too far away from dinner, so she asked Serena if she could see the mysterious guest, and also her brother now. Serena, of course, replied to the little lady that she could see the new family member as she wished, but Adele noticed the puffy eyes of her favorite maid again, wondering why she was crying. Serena smiled at the little lady, not even thinking that the traces of her tears in the form of puffy eyes were noticeable to Adele. The protagonist thought it would be better if she asked her about it later. The girl happily said that she absolutely had to look good today. Serena said she would do everything she could for the child of prophecy for that. Adele is happy that she will have dinner with her father and brother like all happy families do. The girl no doubt wants to make a good impression, so the maids were already helping her with her dress selection, asking her to spread her arms so they could see how the dresses would sit on her. The maids helping with the dress selection admitted that all the options for Adele are incredibly beautiful and they don't know what to choose. And the brown-eyed maid added that, as expected, it would be necessary to hire a personal tailor for the lady. Serena supported the idea of her colleagues, saying that the idea was great and that she would now ask the head maid for her approval. Meanwhile, Serena was already adding the final touches to Adele's image in the form of red bows, finishing dressing up the girl in her new look, saying that everything was ready. The main character, thanks to her maids, received a cute and modest, but at the same time bright image consisting of a blue dress and red bows, which were also on the girl's pigtails. Little Adele happily thanked the servants for helping her with a difficult and important task. Serena and the other two maids smiled at the girl's words of gratitude, admiring her beauty and charm that she would conquer the whole palace with today. The girl became very curious about her brother, what he looks like, what name he has, hobbies, and history. The protagonist hopes that she will quickly make friends with him. Leaving her bedroom and walking down the corridor, the little and dressed-up girl was immediately approached by Thor's guards and Rascal, the latter of whom asked the young lady with interest where she was going, to which the girl said that she was going to meet her brother. Thor's knight relished the happy and charming little lady, covering the blush on her cheeks with her hand. Rascal excitedly told the protagonist that if she had the young lord in mind, he could escort the lady directly to his room. Having agreed to Rascal's suggestion, the two knights, along with little Adele, were already walking toward the young lord's room with smiles and cheerfulness, anticipating the protagonist's joy about the new member of the family. The girl reflected that she was more excited at the moment than when she had met her father. Then she was afraid that she would be abandoned, but now everything is fine and she feels better from the realization that she will not be returned to the orphanage. The little girl is also very grateful to Kahan for everything he has done for her. Adele decided that when he comes to see her, she will thank him. Rascal was walking quietly ahead of everyone, humming different tunes to himself, but what he saw in front of him made him stop doing so out of slight confusion. Adele, Rascal, and Tora witnessed a strange scene. Outside the room where Adele's brother was likely to be, a number of worried maids were crowding around, one of whom was holding a bowl of something. The knave stopped in the corridor with incomprehension and called out to the young lady to inform her of his words. The girl responded to her knight. The knight turned to the protagonist and, pointing with his hand, said that this was the room of the young lord and Adele's brother. Adele noticed that there were many worried maids standing just outside the door of her brother's room, and she was only interested in one question. What had happened? The protagonist decided to go ahead and ask the worried maids what was going on here, apologizing before doing so. One of the maids saw Adele and approached her, showing her a bowl with a burgundy liquid in her hands. The blonde-haired maid said that the young lord was sick and needed to take medicine, but he didn't want to even touch anything. The concerned maid also said, looking sadly at the door of the young lord's room, that the young lord wanted to go home according to his own words. Adele reflected that she didn't quite understand the situation, but if her brother needed to take medicine, then he must be very sick. Also, Adele realized that her brother didn't come from an orphanage, since he wants to go back to where he lived before the Duke's palace. The protagonist boldly suggested that maybe the maids are so scared because her brother is a bad person. But then one of the brown-haired maids shared her worries that she was very worried about the young master's condition, and Adele realized that she was willing and able to solve the problem. The protagonist resolutely told everyone that she would also try to help her brother, who was in trouble because of the disease. The blonde-haired maid wanted to warn Adele or object to her in some way, but her ward with a look told her to let the young lady do what she wanted, because it could help the young lord. And the maid, holding a plate of medicine in her hand, kindly gave it to the girl, warning her to be careful. Adele, full of motivation to help her brother, said she would be as careful as possible. After the protagonist entered the young lord's chambers, she stopped and looked at him. In front of her, a young boy who looked very similar to Duke Azin was sitting on the bed. He was breathing hard and sweating from his ailment as he looked at the girl who had entered his room. Looking at the young lord, Adele couldn't believe that it was her brother, and she certainly couldn't tell from his appearance that her brother looked healthy. The little lady presented the young lord with a bowl, saying it was medicine and calling the boy her brother. The young lord took the cup from the protagonist's hands with some displeasure and anger, drinking the medicine and looking at the girl with red, for some reason, frowning eyes. Adele really wanted to ask what his name was, but didn't dare, assuming there would be a more appropriate time to do so, namely a family dinner. Little Adele was also curious about her brother's illness. After Adele had helped her brother to take his medicine and ease his condition, Serena decided in their room to tell the girl a little about the fact that the young lord had recently lost his parents, and he was 37th in line to the throne. Therefore, the affairs of the duchy did not interest him. Serena added to her words that Duke Azin decided to accept the lord during the emergency meeting that was held this morning, and Adele's brother already has the duke's surname. It turns out that the young lord is the heir who will lead the duchy. Adele is worried about the lord because right after the death of his parents, he came to another family. The protagonist worries about the fact that he was forced to do this and whether they asked his opinion before making such a decision. The red-haired maid, Serena, also revealed that the bodies of his parents, who went missing about 3 weeks ago, were found this morning. And on this, the red-haired maid decided to end her story, reasoning that everything else Adele needed to know she would learn from the mouth of her brother himself. She understood why the young gentleman was so sad and irritable when she first met him, and it made her sad too, because he had been forced to come to another family right after the death of his parents. Gradually, the day turned into evening, and it was time for the long-awaited family dinner, which little Adele had been looking forward to since the beginning of the day. The cute little girl appeared in front of Duke Eisen in the same beautiful blue dress, greeting her daddy and calling him Duke. Dinner had already been served on the table, and the Duke and Lord were already eating. Eisen at this time was munching on the food that was served for dinner. Deciding to swallow the food first, the Duke looked at Adele, who was already feeling a bit awkward. Finally, exhaling and finishing chewing the meat, Eisen also said hello to his little daughter. While Adele sat down at the table that already had a dinner of roasted bird ribs on it, Eisen was the first to speak to the young lord, saying that it seemed like 5 years had passed since they hadn't seen each other. The young lord, cutting a small piece off the dish, corrected Duke Eisen that it hadn't been 5 years, but 6 years since they hadn't seen each other, looking at his food with frowning eyebrows. The protagonist silently watched and listened to their conversation, marveling at her brother's voice being so hoarse. Deciding to also join in the family conversation, the girl turned to the lord with a smile and interest, calling him brother and saying that she was Adele Alkiviade. Duke Eisen ate his dinner in silence and smiled genuinely at the fact that his daughter even remembered to say her last name to the new, frowning, and silent member of the family. After telling the young lord her name, Adele asked her brother what his name was with curious joy, anticipating that now she would finally know the name of her family member. But without saying a word, the young lord, pretending not to have even heard the protagonist, ignored all her questions and continued to cut the meat into pieces. Adele felt incredibly embarrassed by her brother's ignoring her. She thought it would have been better to ask Serena his name beforehand. The protagonist thought, what if her brother was unhappy that she didn't know his name? But then Duke Eisen, who was watching the situation and also cutting his dish into pieces, interrupted the silence with the phrase, 5 laps around the arena, addressed to the lord. The young lord became even more angry when he heard those words from the duke, but he still didn't want to speak. Then Duke Eisen, after not hearing any response from the lord to Adele's question, increased the punishment by saying 10 laps around the arena. Adele still didn't understand exactly what was going on and what circles Papa Eisen was talking about, but she was becoming increasingly uncomfortable and embarrassed because of the heated situation. As the young lord continued to remain stubbornly silent, Duke Eisen added more laps around the arena to his punishment by saying 20 laps out loud. Adele fearfully realized the fact that all of this would have to be done to her brother just because Duke Eisen said so. The young duke remained silent and silent until the duke threatened to increase the punishment to 40 laps around the arena, and that number was the last before he gave up, deciding to say his name. The little boy, maintaining the same anger and displeasure at the table, briefly told the protagonist that his name was Blake. Alarmed at the great punishment for her brother, Adele thanked him for telling her his name after all. The pink-haired protagonist was delighted to learn her brother's name, which sounded completely like Blake Alkiviad. She also noticed that her brother and her dad were quite similar in appearance. While eating dinner, the girl decided to ask her brother about his age another time. Wanting to dilute the unpleasant situation, Duke asked little Adele if her schoolwork today went well. Little Adele told her daddy that the class certainly went well, but in fact, the morning meeting with her brother had left so many impressions that the heroine couldn't focus on the class, and she didn't remember one bit of what was there because she was thinking about the upcoming dinner. After asking about the class, Duke Eisen also asked why Adele didn't call him Daddy, referring to when she came to the table, even though she calls Blake her brother. Adele realized that it was overly important to her daddy what she called him. The girl looked at Duke Eisen and said that she would call him her daddy from now on, to which Adele's father smiled as if he got what he wanted and told the girl, "Fine." The protagonist sensed her dad's jealousy in this. Adele recalled that her best friend Madeline was also jealous when Adele hung out with other friends, even though she tried to hide it. The heroine looked at Blake again and thought that, even though it was just her and the Duke talking now, surely her brother was okay now. The past dinner had been atypical and, in places, tense, but Adele had been able to recognize her brother's name, which was a good start. The evening was slowly turning into night, and Adele was already in bed preparing for sleep. With her index finger, Adele wrote Blake's name along with his last name on the sill of her window, apparently practicing learning the imperial alphabet. Adele watched sadly from her bedroom window as her brother was already running his 10th lap around the arena, and she felt sorry for him. The protagonist is convinced that she would have died of fatigue after half a lap if she had been in young Lord Blake's shoes, but the Lord went on and on running. The little lady watched Blake sadly, asking the knights, Thora and Rascal, standing behind her, if it was difficult to run 40 laps around the arena. To the girl's question, Rascal, with Tora standing beside him, replied that you would feel dead after such a run. The knight answered the girl as if he too had ever run 40 laps around the arena. The girl sat by the window with a sad face because she realized that it was her fault that Blake was now tormented and exhausted. Tora leaned over to the sad girl and told the lady that she didn't look well. Adele immediately told Tora her worries about her brother having to run 40 laps. Unexpectedly, to both guards, the little girl strongly stated that she wanted to help her brother. The protagonist thought, what would she have to do to accomplish this? The rascal, with slight concern, told the girl his opinion that he didn't think she needed to care for the young lord so much. But Tora, who was in favor of the protagonist's idea, said it would be a good idea to bring him some cool water and towels, also offering to make her brother a snack. Knight Rascal, hearing that the little girl liked the snack idea, suggested that Adele start with some sort of cucumber pie. A short time later, Adele, accompanied by Tora and Rascal, was already outside and walking towards her brother with a tray carrying a glass of water, a towel, and an interesting cucumber pie about the size of a brownie. The cucumber cake had been made especially for Adele by the palace chef, who always said he would cook anything for the little lady. Adele was worried about whether her brother would like such an appetizer. The young lord, after running another uncounted lap and stopping to catch his breath, saw Adele and her guards walking towards him with a tray. When she approached her brother, the protagonist told him that she thought he would be tired, so she brought him some cold water. Adele went on to say that in addition to a glass of water, which she tried to bring cold and with ice cubes, she also brought a towel. The caring girl also added that she had also brought her brother a cucumber pie in case he was hungry. Blake grabbed his head from exhaustion and grudgingly asked the young lady why he needed all this. Little Adele confessed and answered Blake that she just wanted to help him because she knew how hard it was for him. But Blake, with only an angry look at Adele and what she had brought for him, ignored her again, just walking past on his own business. Adele likes her brother, but she guesses that the feeling is probably not mutual. They don't know each other well yet, and she's probably boring him, which is what the girl thought. And suddenly, to everyone, the young lord who wanted to leave turned around to Adele and went to the little girl. Blake allowed himself to take a glass of water from Adele's tray, saying that he was a bit thirsty after all. Taking the glass of cool water that still had ice cubes in it, the young lord drank the entire glass, which pleased Adele immensely. The boy placed the empty glass tumbler on Adele's tray, while the girl happily watched him and the way he drank. The shy girl, to ease the tension in their interaction, decided to ask Blake to take care of her, calling him brother. To which the young lord smirked slyly and replied that girls, unlike boys, just need to be nice. Adele heard the compliment in the boy's words and was fascinated that she was able to bond with her brother after all. She looked at him with her magical eyes that looked like it was night too. After this event, a tailor was invited for little Adele, who began to measure the parameters of her body, asking the girl to look forward and do not move. The protagonist still has a pleasant residue from last night's compliment from Blake, which is evident from her smiling face. While the seamstresses were measuring Adele's arms and height with a sewing ruler, the girl recalls that the young lord called her sweetheart yesterday. She assumes he doesn't hate her, as she thought before. Adele admits that her brother was not verbose, but looked her straight in the eye and even smiled at the end. The girl sees this as a very good sign. At this time, a certain woman with golden hair was writing down the measurements she got on a sheet. The woman with short golden hair picked up the sewing ruler again, measuring the length of Adele's arms, asking her to keep her hands at shoulder level. And the protagonist kept thinking about the fact that Blake's parents' funeral hadn't even taken place yet. The blonde-haired designer with fiery eyes, who measured the girl's measurements to sew clothes, admitted that she was honored to meet a man she knew only through legends. The designer, of course, was referring to Adele. The cheerful blonde woman also excitedly said that the Duke had allocated an unlimited budget to dress Adele up, something the woman could only dream about in her designer dreams. Adele turned to Serena, the maid, asking if what the designer had just said was true, to which Serena kindly replied that it was, and that blonde-haired woman with the blue earrings was Miss Cyrilin, the famous designer. Head maid Noelle complimented Serena's words by saying that Adele's unlimited budget for clothes shows how much the Duke cares about her. Noelle shared that the Duke even told her that a couple million won't impoverish Adele. The little heroine was almost horrified when she heard Noelle say such a big number for her, which is still meant specifically for the girl to just have something to wear. She recalls that when she was still living in the orphanage, the most expensive bread in Madame Sharon's store cost only 100. But here the girl heard a figure that does not fit in the little girl's head. She tries to guess how much it is. After concluding that a couple of million sounds like a lot, the little girl realized that she would never be able to pay off her debt to the Duke. Then she wondered why he was doing all this for her. While Adele had the attention of the maids and the designer, she kept thinking about the Duke's care in her direction. It made the girl wonder if it was like that in all families. It had been a very long day for the girl, which thankfully quickly changed to evening and night. A bright moon reigned over the large Hertz castle. The main character was already in bed while Serena sat beside her to tell the tale. But Adele had told the maid that no fairy tales were needed tonight because the tired girl would be able to fall asleep without them. Serena was at first a little surprised that the girl had decided for the first time to refuse to read a story before bed. But then, getting up from the girl's bed, she smilingly wished the little lady sweet dreams, thus saying goodbye to her. The sweet little girl also wished her favorite maid a good night, after which Serena left the bedroom, closing the door behind her. To make sure Serena had left, Adele opened one eye, seeing that the door was locked and the maid had indeed left. Adele got out of bed, already plotting something. The protagonist remembered Kahan's words when they first met, who said that if she left her bedroom window open, he would definitely come to her. The girl got out of bed and put on her slippers, already approaching the window. She recalls that Han told her that he would definitely come. The heroine opened her bedroom window, but she still did not understand how Han was going to get to her as far as the 5th floor, which was very interesting to the girl. Little Adele began to worry about Han, for he could easily be caught by the guards if he didn't follow at least one precaution. The lonely and a little sad princess kept looking out the window, trying to see her new friend with snow-white hair on the street. But unexpectedly, the protagonist heard a familiar voice behind her, which sharply called her by name, which made Adele a little frightened and immediately turned around. The spontaneous guest in her bedroom turned out to be a small iron spirit with large swords behind his back, a kind smile looming on his face. Adele turned around to him and said hello to him, smiling as well. Adele thought to herself that it had been a long time since she had seen the iron spirit. While in the palm of the protagonist's hand, the spirit congratulated the girl on her new family, and Adele graciously thanked him for it. The iron spirit with red eyes admitted to the girl that he had been watching them, after which he asked if Adele liked her new family members. The little lady answered the iron spirit that of course she liked them and she was happy. The girl also told the little spirit that she had a new friend, after which the iron spirit asked if she was now talking about her secret friend. Adele, with a smile and happy eyes, confirmed that she was talking exactly about her secret friend, who said to call him Han. The protagonist decided not to tell anyone that she had befriended Han because the adults might get mad at her for being friends with the servants. The girl remembers that the handsome boy's name is Kahan. For the umpteenth time, she thought she had heard that name somewhere before, but couldn't remember where. Adele confesses to the Iron Spirit that Khan is a very kind and well-mannered boy, and to be honest, she misses her old friends from the orphanage very much. The girl is glad to have Han and a brother. But still, no matter how good she feels, Adele is still burning to meet her best friend Madeline and her other friends. Iron Spirit decided to share the little lady's feelings, saying that he understands her. But after that, what caught his attention was what was going on behind the girl. Pointing at something with his index finger and looking there, the Iron Spirit informed the protagonist that her friend had come to see her. Adele momentarily looked around when she could still hear a familiar voice behind her, calling her by name. She was excited to see her secret friend behind her. Behind her in the window was indeed Kahan, who was smiling at the girl and wearing light-colored clothes. In addition to that, there was a brown cloth resting on his shoulders. The protagonist noticed the cloth on Khan's shoulders and immediately thought that with its help, her friend could float in the air. She asked Han in amazement and excitement how he managed to stand on the other side of the window, being on the 5th floor. The white-haired boy responded to Adele's interest and shock by putting his index finger to his lips, prompting her to be quiet or they would both be noticed. Stepping closer to Han, the girl recognized the answer to her own question. Han, it turned out, was not floating in the air with the help of the cloth on his shoulders, but had been standing on a tree branch the whole time. But then the girl realized that originally there had been no tree under her window, which left her even more stunned. Han, still on the branch of the tall tree, explained to the astonished little lady that he was the one who had grown the tree and had to spend several magical growth scrolls to do so. It was most likely the first time the curious little girl had heard of the mysterious and obscure magic scrolls, so she asked Kahan about them. But Kahan didn't bother to explain anything to the little lady who didn't understand anything about magic. He only said with a smile that Adele could come out to him as well. The girl's face read not only shock over the situation, but also fear. She clarified to her secret friend that she had to go out right now and out of the window. Han, guessing that the little girl might have a fear of heights, like a true gentleman, extended his hand to the little lady, which the girl grasped, leaving the bedroom through the window. Climbing out the window proved to be a bit dangerous and clumsy, but fortunately Han caught the girl and held her close to him so that the young lady would not fall from a very tall tree. As it turned out, the protagonist was terribly afraid of the height she found herself at, and even more afraid of falling from it. She looked down frantically while Han held her. The white-haired boy told the frightened Adele in a calm voice to calm down, and if she was scared, to close her eyes. The girl heeded the boy's advice and closed her eyes. Staying in Han's arms, Adele felt that they were coming down from the tree. The protagonist did not risk opening her eyes because her fear of heights was stronger. After lowering the frightened little girl down from the tree, Han said that it was already safe to open her eyes. The boy was kindly removing leaves from her long pink hair, suggesting that Adele had hurt herself. While Kahan was carefully removing the leaves from the little girl's hair, Adele remembered and decided to thank him for last time because she hadn't thanked him for that yet. The little girl also added that she missed him, but Kahan kept removing the tree leaves from her head, asking the girl if he had done something that he really needed to be thanked for. Adele emphatically told Kahan that he really did because he took her hand and helped her get away from the animals she didn't want to see, and he also helped her meet her mom and told her about Shin-Su. The girl wanted to say one more thing, but stopped herself before doing so. Awash with feelings, the girl confessed to her secret friend that he was the one who first told her that she wouldn't be abandoned, because that was incredibly important to the girl. Han looked serenely at the sweet girl with a smile, saying that she should have known about all this herself, not thanking him now for the common knowledge. The little pink-haired girl, embarrassed, thanked her secret friend once more anyway, adding that she had been waiting for him to say that. The cuteness, sincerity, kindness, and simplicity of the protagonist's soul made Han feel embarrassed, causing a blush to appear on his cheek. He himself became a little embarrassed by it. Taking off the brown cloth that used to be on his shoulders, the handsome boy covered the girl's shoulders with it and looked into her eyes, saying that it was time for their walk. Adele's secret friend took her hand again, leading her away from the castle. The girl wanted to agree to Han's words, but only asked herself in her mind, where exactly were they going to walk? The protagonist, together with Han, was able to leave the Duke's palace without any problems, without running into guards or maids. Han led the girl far away from the castle. Walking with Han by the hand through the thickets of the garden, the girl walked along the path and thought what this time wants to show her interesting friend. In front of her, the girl noticed a familiar building. It turned out that Khan led the interested girl to the familiar building, Shinsu's Blessing, where the main character had already been and admired the portrait of Duke Azin with Basirta. Kahan asked the small and surprised lady, who was anticipating something interesting, to open the door of the building for, as the boy had already told her, only members of the ducal family could do so. Without difficulty opening the door of the beautiful temple and getting inside, the girl instantly noticed that everything around her has changed a lot. The protagonist noticed that the room, where there used to be just a picture of the Duke and Beasirta, was greatly transformed. The portrait was no longer there. All the wallpaper and lamps had become different. There were also new things. Surprised by the changes, Adele turned to Han, who had been watching her reaction the whole time, and asked why everything in the room had changed. Khan began his story by saying that this place was called Shinsu's Blessing for a reason. If the owner, for example, decided to escape here in the middle of a war, the building would be a perfect refuge. Kahan reminded him that only members of the ducal family could open the door of this building. The boy went on to say that it was safe and there were all the necessary things and food inside to survive. Kahan confirmed that the room was customized to Adele's wishes. The excited girl concluded that the room and the things in it would change depending on the situation, to which Kahan replied that the girl was picking up information on the fly. The girl continued to look at the new items in the room and thought that if yesterday there was a portrait of Beasirta because she wanted to see her, today there are dolls and a piano. The girl does love the different dolls, but one thing kept her wondering, what is the white piano in the room for then? Kahan walks over to the piano and starts touching its keys, saying that the piano is probably here for him and the dolls are for Adele. The protagonist is surprised because this place, which is kind of meant for all the members of the ducal family, also took care of Khan, who is the crown imperial prince. Muttering something to himself, Kahan said that he would probably play it now. With these words, he sat down at the musical instrument. Kahan began to play a very beautiful and soothing melody, the sound of which gradually spread throughout the room of the building, which began to mesmerize Adele. The melody was so harmonious, graceful, and marvelous as a whole that little Adele had her mouth ajar from its beauty. She could not even guess that Han could make art. It seemed to the sweet girl that with his playing, it was as if Han was transmitting his happiness through the piano. Adele really wanted to know how he learned to play so beautifully. When Khan finished playing the piano, the protagonist complimented him by saying that he played very beautifully, which made Kahan embarrassed again. A slightly sad Kahan, looking at the beautiful snow-white piano, confessed to the lovely Adele that he hadn't played it for a long time because there was no use for it in war. The girl told Kahan defeatedly that if he liked it, he could play especially if he was so good at it, and even if there was no use in it, as the boy said. Adele said his incredible playing warms the soul of the listener. The talented and shy boy was once again embarrassed by the compliments on his playing, and then asked Adele if she wanted to hear him play again. Adele, who was overwhelmed with emotions of joy and delight after Han's first tune, of course agreed, getting ready to listen to the beautiful melody a second time. The handsome white-haired boy objected to the girl that actually that wasn't why they were coming here, but still he prepared to play another piece of music for her. Han began to play the same beautiful and incomparable melody that he had the first time. Adele's mind was filled with more and more thoughts of wanting to get to know her mysterious friend better. She still wondered how he was able to learn to play such beautiful melodies. After the music session, Han also admitted that his melody turned out to be enchanting, like a sense of tranquility. Adele thought she wanted to tell the boy the same thing. But suddenly the little boy changed the musical mood to a serious topic, talking about war. He said that it could stop. Kahan also told Adele that it is not just a war between countries, but a tedious and endless war that has been going on for hundreds of years. It's all because people ignored the warnings from the prophecy and are now paying for their sins. Adele thought about it when she heard Khan say that a prophecy that appeared hundreds of years ago predicted a war that has lasted to this day, and the girl asked Kahan what the prophecy said. The polite boy with a smirk answered Adele that the prophecy told her to find it if the people wanted to survive. Adele didn't quite understand her friend's words. The boy stood up from the piano stool and looked at the misunderstanding girl and confessed that he had brought her here thinking she was lonely without friends, but it didn't seem to be necessary anymore. Kahan continued talking and informed the protagonist that news had reached him that she had recently gotten a brother. Adele, holding a large brown teddy bear with cute eyes in her hand, confirmed her friend's words by saying yes, but the girl admitted to Kahan that she was still waiting to meet him. Adele reasoned her last words by saying that Kahan was only one of a kind, which again made the little boy confused by the little girl's sincere words. Scratching his neck with his hand and looking somewhere to the side, Han also told the girl that, to be honest, he was also waiting to meet her. Han added that he was really looking forward to meeting the little lady for the reason that the main character is very unusual. Adele happily decided to tell her secret friend the fact that yesterday she had a dream that had him in it. Kahan was already in surprise, but the girl added to her words that in that dream he drew Shinsu for her. The handsome boy thoughtfully told Adele that if there was a canvas in the room instead of a piano, he would paint her now, and if not her, a blue butterfly. The protagonist was so curious about his statement that she asked Han why he would paint a blue butterfly. Khan replied to the young and interested lady that he compared Adele to the blue butterfly because they looked a lot like her. Kahan told the little girl that blue butterflies, like Adele, seem very free to him, and also some people believe that with one flap of their wings, they can change the world. And Adele, like blue butterflies, is also precious, which is what Kahan told the protagonist, looking her straight in the eyes. The girl with pink hair became very embarrassed by the boy's words to herself. She lowered her eyes to the floor, and showing a cute smile on her face, she said thank you to Kahan. Kahan again asked the young lady what she was thanking him for, to which Adele replies that she was thanking him for everything he had done for her. The boy shared his opinion with the girl, saying that he doesn't think he has anything to thank him for. The girl remembered and agreed to this so as not to embarrass Han with her continuous gratitude. Adele decided not to talk only about herself and cheered up Kahan by saying that she hoped he couldn't get married. The little girl explained that he was too young to get married and adults should not force him to marry so early. The boy replied with confusion and a smile that the things she was dreaming of would one day come true. Suddenly, Kahan interrupted the conversation about his personal life and apprised the protagonist that he would help her meet Madeline someday. The unexpected promise and help from a secret friend pleased Adele so much that she questioned him about it, hoping she hadn't overheard it. The white-haired servant answered the little lady that he was certainly not lying. The heroine said she was very glad of this, already anticipating a long-awaited meeting with her best friend Madeline, whom she had not seen for a long time. But the pleasant dreams of meeting her friend were interrupted by an inconsistency which little Adele noticed at once. She couldn't remember if she had even talked about her friend to Kahan before. 4 days after her second unforgettable visit to Shinsu's blessing and a closer encounter with Kahan, Adele decided to write a letter for her friend Madeline. The girl's dad isn't at the estate and she can't meet her brother again, and Han hasn't shown up since their last meeting in the building with the piano. Adele worries if he's okay now. While the girl, pen in hand, was trying to figure out the correct way to write A or E, Chopin came up behind her and announced that he had come to replace the guards. Chopin looked with a smile at the young lady, who was interrupted from writing the letter by a glance at him. At that moment, Tora also approached them, asking what the little girl was doing. And Adele happily answered Tora that she was writing a letter for her best friend Madeline. Now that little Adele is sure that she will not go back to the orphanage again, she should try to write a letter for her best friend Madeline, because Adele could not say goodbye to her properly, and she thinks that her friend is waiting for a letter from her. But suddenly Adele remembers that Madeline may not be able to read yet. At the orphanage, only a girl named Jenny could read, but she and Madeline were on bad terms. Adele decided to send the sheet to her friend anyway, putting a pen on the table and writing a letter with a text saying that they would see each other soon, and Madeline was the first person Adele wanted to tell about her departure. She was really sorry. The girl added that she misses her very much and asks Madeline to wait for her. After writing the letter, the protagonist went to Chopin, saying that she had a request for him. Chopin happily turned to the girl and asked what exactly he would help the girl deal with. Adele smilingly handed Chopin the letter she had written and asked him to send it to the orphanage she had been taken from. Chopin, as well as Tora nearby, were in astonishment at the girl's request. Chopin, smarting at the fact that Adele had given him an important assignment, said that he promised to deliver it wherever the protagonist said. The rainbow-haired knight bragged to his friend Tora that the young lady trusted him, and Tora said naively that losing to him was so humiliating. Serena interrupted the knight's fun by forgetting to tell Adele the important news that today's teacher would not be Sir Ehin. After holding some intrigue, Serena informed the little girl that Teacher Ehin would be replaced today by young Mr. Blake. Adele wondered, for Mr. Blake might be in mourning after the death of his parents. They hadn't even had time to bury them properly. Adele assumes that for this reason it will be difficult for Mr. Blake to teach the girls' lesson. Adele, along with Serena, Tora, and Chopin, prepared to enter Blake's room. Upon entering the room, Adele was looked at by the red eyes of young Mr. Blake, who, according to his usual habit, looked at the main character with his evil gaze. Young Mr. Blake, looking somewhere in the floor, was just surprised at Adele's arrival. The protagonist thought about her brother looking better than he did a couple days ago. Serena, Tora, and Chopin tilted their heads slightly and stood in a row and said hello to Blake in a friendly manner. Behind Blake's teacher, Adele saw 3 guards holding many swords and spears, which alerted and frightened her. Also, the protagonist noticed that her brother Blake was even dressed in his teacher's clothes to make the girl feel like she was in a normal class with Ehin. Teacher Blake, looking at the pen in his hands that had a worn tip, said that even if Ehin is in trouble, learning is still necessary, so today he will be Adele's teacher. Adele was frightened by Blake's frightening words, asking her brother if her teacher was ill, but Serena told her that her teacher had just cut himself during fencing practice, and the young lord had agreed to replace him. Serena also added that Blake, like Ehin, was doing great at the academy, and that was the reason Blake would be teaching her today. Blake spent the entire time looking at Adele's pen, the tip of which was badly worn. He asked the people around him about it, expecting to hear the answer. Serena immediately said politely that Adele was trying very hard in her studies, which was the reason why the tip of the pen was worn. Hearing this made the young lord even more angry, angrily saying that the girl could tell him that herself, hinting Serena not to even interfere in their conversation. Tora, Chopin, and Serena felt a chill run through their bodies as Blake made a disgruntled remark to the maid. Realizing they needed to talk, Adele modestly said hello to Blake, calling him brother. But the young lord and aka Adele's teacher angrily told the little girl to speak to him formally and not call him brother. Adele, trying at the same moment to correct her mistake, said hello to Blake, calling him teacher. But Blake, who can't be pleased, reprimanded the girl again, asking her to call him sir. The protagonist did not understand the meaning of the last word, but Serena rushed to her aid, saying that sir is called someone who graduated from the school in which the girl will study. The girl realized that she, it turns out, will go to the same school as her brother. The protagonist is very uncomfortable calling Blake sir, so she asks Blake if she can just call him brother. Blake did not give a clear answer to Adele's question. Instead, he sternly ordered the servants holding guns to leave the room, reasoning that he wanted to be alone with Adele. The subordinates told the young lord, fine. Throwing all their weapons on the floor, the 2 subordinates left the room, walking past Chopin and Tora, who didn't fully understand what was going on. The little lord turned around and looked at Adele's guards with his evil and hateful gaze, asking if they too would leave the room. Chopin was the first to decide to explain to the young lord that they, as the girl's personal guards, had no right to leave her for even a second. But Lord Blake, making his look and even angrier, told Chopin that he was not the man who would have military power in the state in the future, and was this how a knight was taught to communicate with aristocrats? Tara, who had been standing beside Chopin all this time, notified the young lord that they were also leaving the room. Chopin wanted to object to her, but was afraid to do so in front of the aristocracy. The 2 knights, Chopin and Thora, were ordered to leave the room, which they did. Chopin only had to look at Adele with a sad look as he walked out into the hallway. Left alone with her new teacher Blake, Adele shyly asked him what they would be learning today. After the knights left the room, Blake seemed to show his real face, becoming even angrier for an as yet unknown reason. He didn't answer Adele's question, but asked her if she really didn't know anything. Adele was beginning to feel a growing fear. She looked at her new teacher and fearfully replied to the Lord that not knowing something was not a sin. That's what the adults had told her. Blake, realizing that the girl truly knew nothing, asked her once more if she really didn't know what had recently caused his parents to die. Placing Adele's pen on the table, Blake admitted to the protagonist that if the child of prophecy had shown up a month earlier, his parents would be alive. The little girl was in difficult amazement at her brother's words, asking him if it was true that she was connected to his parents' death. Blake didn't say anything to his sister, though he had something on his mind. Instead, he walked over to the table on which the sword lay. Walking over to it, he picked it up. Looking at the sword with the incredibly long and thin blade in his hands, the young lord told Adele to come over to him, calling her sister and ordering her to do so quickly. At first, little Adele was, of course, frightened by this behavior of her brother, but then she decided to be brave, whereupon she went to him, thinking that he would not harm her. Walking very close to her new teacher, Blake, Adele once again asked him what had happened to his parents. Blake, slightly surprised at the girl's boldness, began to tell her that the Kazmak Empire was not the only one on the continent, and the boy asked his sister if she was aware of the fact that there was now a massive war between them and the Fuman Empire. Adele modestly answered her brother that she didn't know that before, and Blake continued his story by saying that for the past 600 years they had been allies. Noticing that his sister didn't understand the meaning of the word allies too well, Blake simply told her that the empires at first were friends with each other. But now the friendship between the two empires had come to an end, and there are rumors going around that it was due to the mysterious and rejected them. The protagonist became incredibly curious who her brother meant when he mentioned the word them, and why they were rejected. But Blake went on to say that for what it's worth, the Fumans had decided to terminate the contract unilaterally. Adele clarified with her brother that it turns out they were friends at first, but the streams wanted to fight. Blake replied that they were, and until they completely destroyed them, the war probably wouldn't stop, which was what the Lord wanted to say. Blake concluded, looking at the sword in his hands, and said that in general they had broken their promise and attacked them, which happened before the child of prophecy appeared. Starting to talk about the child of prophecy, Blake said that the prophecy said that the child would appear in the Hasfelt Empire, but it hadn't appeared in hundreds of years, and so the Fuman decided to intervene. Blake went on to say that the Fumans thought that even if the child of the prophecy did appear, they would not be able to recognize it among the others, and then the precious child would die. The little girl thought about her brother's words because she realized the reason why everyone said they had been searching for her for hundreds of years. The little girl remembered that she really didn't understand anything when they told her that, but now Adele realizes how important she is to everyone here. The main character told Blake that since she was found, why not tell the Fuman Empire so they wouldn't look for her anymore? But the girl's brother replied to her that there was no way they could officially tell the other empire because the mysterious they would find out about it and kill Adele. The girl remembered that her Ehan teacher had told her roughly the same words. The teacher had told the girl about a group of people who didn't want the war to end. Adele realized that the teacher and her brother were talking about the same thing. Her brother went on to tell her sister that the Fuman Empire had finally sided with them, and now they were saying that humanity was going to end. Looking at the main character, Blake said that this is the reason why the Fuman Empire is trying to break their will so that they too will side with them. Blake began to tell the protagonist that the Hasfelt Empire had sent the Fuman Empire a delegation to change their minds, and Blake's parents were part of that delegation. Blake recalls his parents telling him that they would be sure to return safely. But back home after the fateful visit, only Blake's deceased parents returned home in a carriage. Brother Adele says all the members of the Hasfelt Empire delegation were killed. And now Adele's brother says that if Adele had shown up even a little earlier, his parents would still be alive. This makes him very angry for such injustice and cruelty of fate. Adele thought about it because of her brother's words, because he said that the giver can't announce the existence of the child of the prophecy now, and even if she would have appeared earlier, nothing would have changed. This makes the girl feel sad. The girl doesn't understand why she wasn't told about it before, because she, knowing nothing, just rejoiced at the arrival of her brother to her family, without even thinking about what he had gone through and what he had in his heart. Adele asked her brother if he hated her. The young lord answered Adele that he didn't hate her because she wasn't guilty of anything in front of him. He added that the most important thing was that she was found because without her, humanity would perish. Blake also said very important words for Adele, that she is the only hope for the end of the war and the survival of humanity. And if she realized that, they would start the lesson. Meanwhile, in the hallway on the other side of the room where Blake and Adele were, two worried maids were already crowding in addition to the Torah and Chopin guards. One of the maids was greatly worried about Adele, asking the others if she would be all right and if the Lord would behave normally with her. Chopin inadvertently heard from one of the maids that the young lord can be mad, which is characteristic of the Alcibiades, and that frightened the knight. But Thora, standing beside him, told Chopin to keep his temper, to which Chopin replied that he tried very hard to do so. One subordinate who was also talking to the two maids also shared his worries with the girls, hoping that Adele would be all right, as the young lord is on medication. One maid asked the other if Lord Blake had taken his medicine today, to which the other maid, who is in charge, excitedly replied that the last time the Lord took his medicine was when Adele brought it to her. The maid, along with her subordinate, were in incredible amazement when they heard the maid in charge of the medicine say such words. The maid anxiously replied that she couldn't do anything about it, because according to the young lord, when he takes the medicine, it hurts him, and he feels as if he is burning inside. He himself says he would rather be killed than cured. The maid repeated again that there was nothing she could do about it. The maid and the subject stood in shock, realizing that this could all end very badly, which is what the servant said. They continued to talk about whether the young lady was safe and if she was all right. Torah and Chopin, who all this time had been eavesdropping on the servants' talk about the Lord's ill health, were shaken with fear. Chopin emotionally thought that if things were so bad with the Lord, why hadn't anyone warned the guards about it? Realizing what a grave and unforgivable mistake the knights had made, Torah and Chopin started shouting at Adele and Blake's door that they should go back immediately to guard Adele again. But then they were interrupted by the loud voice of a man walking towards them down the hallway, who was asking them what was wrong. And turning around, Chopin noticed in amazement that the mad dog Mikhail was approaching them. Once upon a time, a terrible concept like Alcibiades' madness had occurred in the Eisen family. Because of it, Duke Eisen had to forfeit his throne in favor of a tyrant. He gave way to Hasfelt. There was no other way out, because then most of the boys born in the family Alcibiades, for a mysterious reason, just went crazy. And all the girls that were born into the family died before they were even 1 year old. It was like a powerful curse. Eisen Alcibiade had 8 brothers, but all of them didn't live long because most of them were killed by the hands of the dukes, who also went mad. But Eisen was the only one who hadn't lost his mind. Thanks to the fact that he didn't lose his mind, Eisen survived, but from a young age he observed the tragic fate of his family members. That's why he even refused to marry the woman he loved. Her name was Beatsirta, but one day he lost her forever. Eisen didn't want to marry anyone but Beatsirta, but he needed an heir who could survive no matter what, and Blake Alvivid was perfect for that role. That's why Adele was adopted right after the news of Blake's parents' death. Meanwhile, Mikkel, who ran up to Chopin and Torah, who were worried about Adele, once again asked them what was going on, showing his seriousness and authority. Chopin and Torah ran up to Mikkel, happy to have another person to help them. And when Mikkel once again asked simply to tell him what had happened, Chopin told him to save them, for Lady Adele was alone with the young lord. Mikkel checked with the worried knights to see if Adele was indeed left alone in the room with the lord, and without a single guard. The butler standing in the hallway told the mad dog that the young lord had ordered everyone out of the room. Knight Mikhail was surprised at the atypical situation that had occurred in his absence. And Raskal, who was standing behind Mikhail and had also heard the stunning news, was shocked at the risk and danger that Chopin and Thor had taken. The Raskal said it even sounded dangerous, for after all, there is a young lady there. The maid also told Adele's guards that, as servants, there was nothing they could do either. Knight Mikhail, after thinking about the situation for a long time, finally said that if it's Lord Blake and his orders, then he is powerless here because the Lord's orders are prioritized over his. The two maids, Rascal, Chopin, and Torah, clearly didn't expect to hear such words from Sir Mikhail. They stood and stared in a daze at the knight who had no intention of saving Adele from possible danger. Mikhail Battenberg is the rabid dog who is loyal to the Duke to the end. It is said that he laughs like a madman while killing people on the battlefields. His loyalty to Eisen is understandable, for he accepted Mikhail despite being the son of a traitor. No one knew that Mikal's father, the brave hero Rizov, would betray the Empire for them. So Sir Mikal ended up taking a different surname and his title was revoked. No one knows what would have happened to Mikhail if the Duke had not accepted him then. But suddenly Chopin, who was still unhappy that young Adele had been left with the young lord, exclaimed at the top of his voice that this was a child of prophecy and they should do something about it. Mikhail still hadn't decided to make any decisions other than not doing anything about it. He looked angrily at the shouting Chopin, asking if he had anything else to say. Chopin bashfully replied that he had nothing more to say. He figured that if the young lord wasn't on any medication, it was best not to provoke him. Mikhail then asked the servants when His Excellency the Duke would return, to which the subordinate replied that he had heard that he would return tonight. The maids calmed down, saying that all they had to do was endure it. Suddenly all the maids and guards heard a loud and sharp noise that came from Adele and Blake's room. It even made the brown-haired maid startled and turn towards the room, and the knights Mikal and Chopin, upon hearing it, immediately rushed to save Adele, shouting, "My lady!" Meanwhile, in Adele and the young lord's room, where Blake was giving his sister a lesson today, his brother first asked the protagonist to hold a large sword in her hands. Adele is very scared to hold a real cold weapon in her hands, which is evident in her demeanor. When asked by Blake how it was for her, Adele replied that the sword was heavy, and she found it difficult to hold it. But her brother interrogated her, telling her how she felt holding it. The protagonist again said that she felt sick and sad with the sword in her hand, to which Teacher Blake asked if that was all she was feeling. Adele confirmed her brother's hunch by saying, "Uh-huh." Blake then, after thinking about it for a bit, took the long sword away from the little girl's hands, saying he would bring her something else and take this away. Taking the sword from the protagonist's hands, the young lord, instead of carefully placing it back on the table, threw it away from the girl, creating such a rumble that and startled absolutely everyone, including Adele and the people outside the door. Adele thought her brother threw it because she did something wrong. Throwing the sword, Blake picked up an unusually long spear, the blade of which was also bloody. Turning to little Adele, he asked her to try to take it. Adele reluctantly took the spear in her hands, whereupon Blake asked her again about the sensation she was feeling. The girl replied fearfully that her feelings hadn't changed. She still felt just as heavy and bad. Blake said for the umpteenth time that he was not interested in what she felt hard, but asked how Adele felt, whether she was comfortable, whether it was pleasing to the eye and taste, whether her spear was gripping her. But the protagonist embarrassedly replied that she felt none of these things. The protagonist realized that the young lord would give her a weapon until she heard what she wanted. The girl thought, what exactly does her brother want to hear from her? The young lord grudgingly and sternly asked his sister to close her eyes and concentrate, for these were not toys for her. The little girl obeyed her brother and closed her eyes, trying to visualize, imagine, and understand what she was feeling while holding a large, bloody spear in her hand. Noticing that the little girl really didn't feel anything while holding the bulky spear, Blake put his palm to his chin and asked Adele if she really didn't feel anything. Adele answered him that she wasn't completely sure. Then the young lord asked the little girl to take in her hand such a throwing weapon, also called assassin's weapon. Blake spoke of a shuriken. Adele asked her brother why a strange star-shaped thing like a shuriken was called an assassin's weapon, to which the young teacher replied that it was usually used to eliminate people covertly. Catching an earful of scary words for Adele, such as eliminating people, the girl said that she would never touch that thing. Blake asked the young lady with a smile why she wouldn't touch the shuriken and wondered if she might want to throw the thing at him, but Adele seriously said she didn't want to. The young lord again began to puzzle over which weapons Adele would like and which ones she might find comfortable. Then he asked the girl to pick up a weapon as simple, light, and flawless as a bow and arrow. As soon as she took the bow and arrow in her hands, she immediately felt a kind of refreshing feeling that made it easier to breathe. Blake noticed that the girl might have liked the bow. Blake asked the protagonist how she liked the bow and arrow, to which the girl calmly replied that the weapon didn't give her bad feelings, and she was no longer scared as she was. Then Blake, after asking Adele to give him the bow and arrow for a second, decided to show the main character how to use it properly and release the arrows. Threading the arrow on the bowstring, he told the girl to watch carefully and then repeat, Blake released the arrow from the bow, and it flew in an unknown direction, after which Adele's brother turned to the girl and her to repeat it, telling her that she should be able to handle it. Adele was in slight shock, for it didn't seem easy for her. Holding out the bow to the main character, Blake said that he had already shown her what she had to do. Now it was her turn to do it again. Wanting to help her pull it off, he stood to the side of the girl to help her hold the bow with his hands. This made Adele uncomfortable, and she also felt it was tiring her out. The girl, not knowing what to expect, squeezed her eyes shut, and Blake, helping to hold the bow and arrow, told the girl to draw the bowstring. But Adele told the young teacher with difficulty that it was hard for her, and her arms hurt. Blake heard in the girl's words tiredness and unwillingness to hold the lesson, because of which he asked Adele if she wanted to continue teaching. But the protagonist objected to the young lord, saying that she did not mean that. The young heir to the duchy told Adele that she has the right to skip 1 or 2 lessons, and if she doesn't want to study, he will destroy all the weapons as it's useless. Adele apparently tried to take the bow and arrow from him with the words that he didn't need to go that far. The young lord admitted to the girl that he could see from Adele's emotions how much she disliked the weapon and was afraid of it. Adele told Blake that this is true, but she still asked her brother to keep the weapon because he might hurt himself. To this, the Lord said that the girl should not get so close to the weapon, and himself asked her to move away. But the heated argument between the 2 children was interrupted by a man who loudly burst into Blake and Adele's room. This man turned out to be the knight Mikael, who, hearing loud noises from the room, decided to burst in and shout if everything was all right with the protagonist, calling her "my lady." But the sudden appearance of Knight Michael no longer seemed so surprising when Blake and Adele saw an angry and uncomprehending Duke Eisen ahead of him, who looked at the pair and asked them what they were doing. Blake was the first to tell his foster father that he was getting rid of the weapon Adele was afraid of. Mikael, who was standing behind the Duke, admitted that it was their mistake. The protagonist, noticing her daddy, whom she had missed for a long time, ran to him, and Duke Eisen suddenly lifted the girl in his arms, saying that it looked like the girl didn't hurt herself. With Adele in his arms, the Duke turned to Mikael and asked why they had called him, since the children were just playing in the room. The knights, upon hearing Eisen's words, were greatly surprised, for now games looked like this, with spears, swords, and arrows. Duke Eisen menacingly asked Blake if he had given the girl an excuse when he found out that his daughter had been crying. While Blake didn't know what to answer, Adele realized that Daddy wasn't in a good mood, and if she didn't do something about it right away, he'd make her brother run circles again. The protagonist told her daddy that she was glad he came to save her, but everything was fine and she was calm because he was around. Therefore, the girl asked her daddy to ease his anger. Duke was very surprised by the girl's words, and they really made him not to be angry anymore. The little and cute girl was able to calm down the worried daddy. Eisen went with the girl in his arms down the hall, saying that if she wasn't hurt, he was calm. Not long after the lesson with the young lord, Duke Eisen and the main character and Blake were already eating at the table, drinking tea. Eisen decided to ask Blake again about whether Adele was sure she hadn't hurt herself, to which the young and always angry lord, holding a cup of hot tea in his hand, replied that the girl had not hurt herself and he was just teaching her martial arts. Knight Mikael, who had been standing behind the young lord the whole time, asked him what he would do if Adele did hurt herself, to which Blake replied that she wouldn't do something so stupid. Duke Eisen also decided to intervene in the conversation, asking Knight Mikael how Adele could have gotten hurt if she was just touching the weapon. At first, Mikael didn't know what to answer the Duke, but then he reminded him that the young lady was too weak in body, to which Eisen simply said, "Okay." Eisen decided to switch the topic and talk about Adele's training and lessons. Duke said that the main character won't be going outside for now until she goes to the barrier, which will be in 3 weeks. Little Adele looked at her daddy because she didn't understand the meaning of the word barrier. It was probably the first time she had heard of it, but Eisen again went on to say that it would be better to take the girl to the battlefield sometime or to the candy store. The little lord agreed with the Duke's words because the girl looks like a rice cake but seems to eat normally. Duke Eisen also added that despite going into the barrier, he really wants to leave good memories for Adele before they part. Adele was alarmed by the last words, as she thought she would stay in the family forever. Eisen added to his words that even if they can't get to the pastry shop, he will bring her all kinds of cakes. Blake said that he would bring something to the girl as well. So far, the girl doesn't understand what exactly her dad and brother are talking about, and that makes her sad. But she seems to have realized that Daddy is always thinking about the time he spends with her. The girl sadly realized that there are 3 weeks left of her stay in this palace, and she needs to do everything she can to make some memories of this beautiful place. After the girl, along with her brother and father, were seated at the tea party, the protagonist, pondering the situation, walked resolutely through the garden, accompanied by Mikhail and Rascal. Turning to Mikhail, the girl said she wanted to make gifts for her brother and dad and asked the knight what they liked. Knight Mikhail was surprised by the girl's words, asking her if she really wanted to give her family gifts. The protagonist replied that she was the only one who had received gifts before. Mikhail replied to the little girl not to think that she was indebted to them for that. Rascal also agreed with his words, which further embarrassed Adele. The girl sadly told Mikhail that her daddy bought her so many beautiful things and delicious food, and her brother helped her with her lessons, and she can't do anything for them. Can't even stop the war, even though she is a child of prophecy. Hearing the sweet girl's sad words, Mikhail decided to interrupt the walk by standing in front of the girl. Kneeling down in front of her, the guardian asked the protagonist why she felt that way. Adele revealed that she didn't like it when her daddy or brother was sad. She added that she really wants to grow up soon so that she can save Baysirta and stop the war. The girl believes that this is the only way she can repay everyone. So now that the girl can't do anything, she wants to at least give them something. Mikhail, like Rascal, has developed feelings for Adele. But then Mikhail suddenly hugged Adele, which was an incredible surprise to her. The knight said that the girl was now only 8 years old, and all she should do now was to eat well, study, and be healthy. Mikhail concluded by saying that the little lady was incredible in his opinion, apologizing for hugging her without asking. And Rascal, laughing, added that this is why the CFA exists, which stands for Adele Lovers Club. Mikhail also told the little girl that even if she grows up and upsets everyone, everything will be fine, and he added that her very existence is a gift to everyone. But if she still wanted to give her brother and father gifts, Mikhail advised her to just give them a kiss on the cheek. Adele was surprised at the knight's words, who went on to say that this gift would be the best for both her father and brother. The girl wondered if she would be able to find the right moment for it in 3 weeks. Rascal added his words that Blake and Eisen would be happy to receive such a gift. Noticing that the sky over the palace today was gray and the wind was raging, Mikhail suggested that Adele return to the palace, to which the girl, with an uplifted mood, readily agreed. With the onset of dark evening, the girl as usual took a bath with her personal maid Serena, who admitted to the protagonist that everyone was very worried about her. Adele clarified with Serena if she was talking about today's lesson with the young lord. Serena confirmed that that was what she was talking about. The maid confessed to the sweet girl that she was shocked beyond belief when she heard it. Adele recalled that she had been scared at that moment too. The girl Adele thanked Serena for worrying about her, adding that nothing bad happened. On the contrary, the girl thought that she had even gotten closer to her brother, which was what she had wished for. Adele remembers that she even managed to fall in love with him, but after that he didn't get angry and even gave her a cake during a tea party. Adele wondered if they had gotten closer. Serena, who had been silently watching the silent but calm and thinking girl, told the girl with a smile that she was convinced she was doing well. Toward evening, the gray clouds of the day turned into thick and dark clouds that poured a big rain on the ground. A big thunderstorm was probably starting. The main character was already lying in bed because she, as a proper child, should always go to bed early. The girl remembered Mikhail's words that they had better go home soon, which turned out to be true. The rain outside the window was gradually getting heavier. Serena, as always, sat beside the girl on the bed to read a bedtime story. But this time, the maid said that if the lovely lady was tired, she would read her a story next time, to which the protagonist said okay and wished Serena good night. The maid also wished the girl sweet dreams. The maid left, but Adele, tossing and turning on the bed, could not fall asleep because of the endless stream of thoughts in her head. The girl was trying to find an answer to whether her brother hated her and whether her father, who had gone through many hardships, hated her. Even more, the little girl was worried that if she had shown up just a little bit earlier, then Beacertha wouldn't have been hurt. But then something popped into the little girl's head that instantly hit her. She instantly rose from the bed, remembering that something was troubling her greatly, a question that had been plaguing her all through the long and grueling day. But suddenly, it was at this very moment that a green fairy-like spirit appeared beside the agitated girl. The little spirit, flying through the air, asked Adele what she wanted to ask. Adele immediately told her friend that she was concerned about who her brother was talking about when he said the mysterious word, they. The little spirit did not immediately answer the protagonist's question. Instead, the fairy flew up to the little girl's arms. The little green spirit said that they all loved Adele very much, and for that reason, she couldn't tell her about it. The little girl asked the fairy that she could not tell her about it as well as about the girl's real parents. But the spirit again gave no answer, telling the girl to sleep because she was very tired. The protagonist released the little magical spirit from her palms, asking it if it would still tell her about it. The little spirit replied to the girl that it didn't know that yet. The spirit disappeared imperceptibly, and little Adele gradually fell asleep, thinking of the mysterious them of whom she knew nothing. But if her brother was talking about them, did that mean it was important to Adele too? Finally falling into a dream, the girl found herself in a place unknown to her, where she was alone. The girl asked a logical question where she was, feeling that the dark place was damp and unpleasant. At this moment, the protagonist began to hear terrible voices from nowhere, which whispered and told the girl to save someone, to disappear, which said that it was all because of her, and that it was unfair and painful. The girl is greatly annoyed by the incessant voices and noise from which she covers her ears, wishing she could not hear any of it. The girl really dislikes this place. At the scariest moment, Adele does wake up from her nightmare, rising from the bed with incredible fear. The weak girl is about to cry if no one supports her now. Adele is only comforted by the fact that it turned out to be a dream. She wipes her eyes from her tears and sleepiness before making the decision to get out of bed. Taking her pillow with her, the little girl got out of bed, heading towards the exit. As she left her bedroom, she noticed two maids in the hallway, who coincidentally also noticed the girl. When both maids realized that a crying Adele was standing before them, they were horrified, barraging the girl with questions as to why the girl was crying and if she was scared of the storm. The girl replied to the maids that she really wanted to see her daddy. Meanwhile, at the other end of the palace, Duke Eisen, along with Mikhail, were walking quietly down the corridor. Eisen, wanting to break the silence, asked Mikhail what he thought of Adele. Mikhail replied to his duke that Adele had told him that she wanted to save Bizert when she grew up, and that this was a way for her to repay everyone for their kindness to her. Adele's sincere words made the duke smile as he continued pacing down the corridor. But suddenly their short conversation was interrupted by a subordinate who ran after the duke and Mikhail from behind and called out to them, saying that something bad had happened. The servant, running closer to the duke and knight, informed them with confusion and anxiety that Adele was crying. This news instantly made Duke Eisen angry, and Knight Michael surprised at this turn of events. The servant's words really surprised Eisen. He wanted to find out what the matter was, deciding to go to his daughter immediately and calm her down. While the Duke, along with Mikhail, went to Adele, the little girl sat in her bedroom and Serena served her hot tea to calm her down. The maid comforted Adele by telling her that her daddy would come to see her soon. As soon as Serena stood up, she already noticed Duke Eisen and Mikhail entering the room. The girl's daddy immediately noticed her, throwing his worried look at her. The little girl, happy that her daddy had indeed come quickly, rushed into his arms while Eisen got down on one knee in front of her. Wrapping the sweet little girl in his warm fatherly embrace, Eisen asked Adele if she was crying because she missed him, to which the little girl said she was scared. Duke instantly changed in his face when the protagonist said she was scared. With an angry look, he asked the girl who dared to scare her. Even the modest maids, along with Serena, were frightened by the Duke's angry gaze and sternness, worried that something was about to happen just because Adele said she was scared. But the little girl, looking at Eisen with sweet eyes, corrected herself, telling her daddy that no one scared her, or rather she had a nightmare, and a very scary one at that. The blue-eyed protagonist also added that this was the reason why she wanted Daddy to sleep with her, which she sweetly asked him to do. Eisen never seemed to have heard any human say those words to him before. He just stared at little Adele, wondering and, at the same time, wondering what he should say. But Duke Eisen, deciding not to upset his already frightened daughter, with a smile on his face, told her that of course he would help the girl to sleep soundly after the nightmare by sleeping with her. Taking the girl in his arms, Daddy and Adele left the girl's room, heading for Duke Azen's bedroom. The Duke's room appeared dark and gloomy in places, which immediately told the girl that it was his bedroom. Carrying the girl in his arms and coming to the bed, Azen placed his daughter in the bed and covered her with a red blanket. The girl was very curious as this was her first time here. Sitting down next to the girl on a chair and putting one leg over the other, Azen told the protagonist to fall asleep while he watched over her. But the girl was in no hurry to fall asleep so quickly. She looked at her daddy and Yawan wanted to say something to him, after which she confessed to him that she didn't want them to part. Azen asked the little girl why she didn't want to which Adele replied that she wanted to stay living with him because he was her daddy and she wanted to be his daughter. Azen once again asked the little girl why she didn't want that. The little protagonist confessed to her daddy that she wants to be his real daughter, not the adopted daughter she is now. The Duke listened intently to the girl, while she thought about how the people in the nobility might not like the fact that Daddy had an unassuming and adopted daughter like her. The Duke explained to his daughter almost emotionlessly that if she had Alcibiades' blood in her, a weak girl like her wouldn't last long. Adele asked her dad what he was talking about. Azen replied to the protagonist that there were no women of the Alcibiad bloodline because they all died in terrible agony, and if Adele were his real daughter, she would suffer the same terrible fate. The Duke added that he would have to kill Adele so that she would not suffer in agony. But despite all this, Eisen realized that he loved Adele, and he was very happy that they were one family. Sighing, the father decided to waste no time and read out a story from a book for his daughter before bedtime. Eisen told the little girl that he had already heard about her being able to read. Adele replied that she did, and then Eisen asked her to read the name of the fairy tale on the book he was going to read for her. When her daddy showed her the cover of the book, the girl was able to read the title of the book with hesitation, which read, "The Story of the Dragon Struck by Lightning." Eisen praised the girl, calling her smart, which charmed Adele, and then began to read. Trying to fall asleep, the girl listened to the tale that, long ago, in one small feudal domain, there lived a dragon that was evil and powerful. The girl continued to listen to the tale that her favorite daddy was reading to her. The interesting tale ended with this evil dragon being struck and killed by lightning, and peace reigned in the village once again. After finishing reading, Eisen closed the book, and noticing that the girl seemed to have fallen asleep, he decided to leave. Eisen got up from his chair and told the girl to go to sleep, already preparing to go about his Herzovian business, but the protagonist noticed him leaving and stopped him. The excited protagonist got up from the bed and asked her daddy not to leave, saying she wanted to sleep in his arms. The girl also asked her daddy for permission to do so, asking if she could sleep in his arms. At first, the red-eyed Duke was confused by his daughter's words. Apparently, no one had ever asked him to do that, but then Eisen smiled and sighed as he looked at his lovely daughter. Eisen carefully laid down on the bed next to the girl, also covering her body with a red blanket, then once again told his daughter to go to sleep. Little Adele also thanked her daddy for the fairy tale, to which the Duke replied with the word, "You're welcome." The little girl, who still couldn't fall asleep, kept asking her daddy questions. She asked him if he would sleep, to which Daddy replied that he wasn't sure yet. Adele wondered why, and Eisen said he was uncomfortable. The main character was upset by Daddy's words because she thought that Daddy was uncomfortable because of her. The girl asked Eisen about it, but the Duke answered not what the girl expected. Eisen admitted that he was uncomfortable sleeping with his clothes on because he usually always sleeps without them, and now he didn't have a chance to take them off. The girl, for whom it seems easy, simply told her daddy to take it off so he would be more comfortable, but Eisen replied that he didn't want to do that. Little Adele thought about the situation. She assumed that the reason Daddy didn't want to take off his clothes was because he had too many scars on his body that he didn't want to show. Adele remembered that one novel talked about a certain reishi herb that was good for healing scars. It's hard to find, but the protagonist thought she could ask a fairy-like earth spirit about it. The girl decided to confess to her dad that even though he hates her, she loves him. Eisen, hearing her daughter say this, asked her why she thought he hated her, to which the girl sadly said for the umpteenth time that if she had shown up earlier, Bisirta could have stayed with him and her brother's parents would still be alive. So the girl once again said that if her daddy hates her, that's fine, but she still loves him. At first, the Duke wanted to remain silent as he looked at the little girl, but then he spoke. Adele felt her daddy stroking her hair, telling her not to make up nonsense and that he didn't hate her. The girl said she felt incredibly relieved. The girl said again that she didn't feel like getting married and breaking up with him. Lying on the bed with his eyes closed and listening to the girl, Eisen said that in that case he would have to become a party to treason. Eisen told the girl that she may not know, but Alcibiades' disobedience would have a strong impact on the country, and if he stayed with Adele forever, there could be a civil war. Papa's words shocked the girl, especially when she heard the word treason. She doesn't understand how her simple desire not to marry and stay with Papa has anything to do with treason. Daddy told the girl to sleep for the umpteenth time, but Adele knew for sure that she would definitely not be able to sleep after hearing such nightmarish words. Adele shyly asked Papa if he would go for it, to which Duke Eisen, smirking at the girl's face, replied with an indirect answer saying, "Of course." Little Adele was left to wonder if he was joking or if he was telling the bitter truth. The next clear day after bonding with her father, Adele, full of motivation to help her daddy, walked through the garden accompanied by Mikhail and Chopin. Her desire to help her scarred daddy had not yet been extinguished. The girl wanted to summon the earth spirit to ask him about the Reishitani herb, but she didn't know how. The girl, not knowing what to do, squatted down and just stared at the ground. Chopin, watching this, asked Mikhail in a whisper what exactly the girl wanted to do. But Mikhail didn't know the answer to that question and remained silent. Adele took a lump of earth in her hands, hoping to summon the earth spirit in some way. The girl had never summoned spirits before, and she didn't know how to do it. The girl in her head asked the green spirit if it wanted to appear. After waiting for a miracle, which didn't happen, the girl realized that the green spirit wouldn't be able to appear in front of her so easily. But then the main girl remembered that her secret friend Han said something about spirits, and maybe he would tell her what to call them. But the girl, as in the case of the green spirit, didn't know how to see him. The girl realized that Han and the spirits were her friends, but she didn't even know how to meet them. The sad little girl wondered, did she even know how to do anything? The protagonist wasn't about to give up. She realized that she must first learn about spirits from Han, a young man with silver hair and black eyes who serves in the palace. Filling a clump of earth from the lawn back up with her hands, Adele hoped and, at the same time, wondered he would be found quickly, wouldn't he? When the girl got up from her knees, Chopin's Mikhail politely asked Adele not to eat the earth because she would get sick, to which the protagonist replied that she didn't eat it. After a light walk through the garden, Adele, still accompanied by Chopin and Sir Mikhail, came to Serena's house. Adele asked the maid if her brother would still be teaching her lesson today. Serena answered her affectionately that he would, and the young lord would soon come to see her. Immediately after these words, Serena noticed a silhouette looming towards them. The low silhouette turned out to be Teacher Blake, dressed in brown clothing, who was walking towards Adele and Serena, holding 2 small bows with arrows in his hand behind his back. Blake walked closer to the girl, and Adele was the first to say good morning to him. The young lord also modestly said "aha" to her, after which the protagonist asked what they would be learning today. The boy answered the little girl that today they would have a self-defense lesson, after which he looked at the bows and arrows he was carrying. The little girl asked her teacher about self-defense, having a desire to understand what it was, and Blake said that she must have forgotten that there were mobs of assassins after her since she was a child of the prophecy. It was like goosebumps ran through Adele when she heard that. While Blake was giving little Adele a bow, Chopin, who noticed that Adele was frightened by the teacher's words, wanted to admonish the Lord that his words might frighten her, but the young lord mouthed that Adele should know that too. Blake looked at the girl and told her that if there was a single weapon that the child of prophecy could use, she should be taught how to handle it, and it was all for the sake of them all. And that was why, according to the young lord, he would teach Adele how to properly handle a bow. After the introduction to the lesson, Blake asked the protagonist if she had any objection. The determined little girl told Blake that she had no objection and would learn. Blake mumbled that he would then start by saying a few words about the bow itself. Blake briefly told the protagonist that a bow is a ranged weapon and can be used to kill an enemy that is a long distance away. However, if one doesn't have the courage to pierce the enemy with an arrow, it only costs the enemy to get close, and Adele lost. Blake also added that this is why one must be the first to take the enemy's life if Adele does not want to die herself. At this point, little Adele remembers what her daddy said to her when they were sitting in the garden together. The Duke tells the girl that nobility entails responsibility. This is the first thing her father teaches her. The girl realizes that she too is now an aristocrat and has an obligation to do her duty. Making sure the girl understood, Blake suggested she get down to business. Drawing the arrow on the bow and taking aim, the young lord told the girl to watch carefully and make sure her hand did not touch the tip of the arrow. In addition, Blake told the protagonist to take the arrow by the shaft and put it into the bow as he demonstrates. The teacher added that this is called the tension point. Adele inquired and asked her brother why you can't touch the tip of the arrow. Blake replied that it could be impregnated with poison and she should not hurt herself on it. After one master class from a professional archer and fighter like Blake, the teacher gave the main character a bow and asked her to try it herself. At first, the girl thought that the bow was too heavy for her, but still, it was no longer as difficult as the first time. Adele noticed that the bow and arrows were smaller this time than the first lesson. She assumed that her brother had taken care of it. The brother told the little girl to concentrate. After all, it was her first time. And they would start learning from a target of 10 meters, which the young lord pointed his finger at the protagonist. Informing Adele that the example was now right in front of her eyes, Blake sternly told her to watch and repeat, having already drawn the bowstring and prepared to shoot. Staring menacingly at the target with his red eyes and pulling the bow as tight as he could, Blake released the arrow and it flew towards the designated target in a flash. The arrow that the young teacher released from the bow hit exactly in the center of the target circle, which was not surprising since Blake must have a lot of experience in hunting and fighting. Chopin, who was standing next to the target to announce the results, raised his hand and shouted that Blake had hit the target accurately. Adele gasped in surprise and thought that her brother was not only good with a bow, but also with a sword. The girl thinks her brother can do everything. When it was Adele's turn, she tried to get into about the same stance as her brother, repeating pulling the arrow on the bow as she was shown. She focused on the target, telling herself she could do it. Sensing the right moment, little Adele made a serious face and let go of the drawn arrow, making it fly into the target. As Adele's arrow flew in the air, the intrigue did not subside for a second. But to the surprise of everyone present, who seemed to expect the first attempt to fail, the girl's arrow hit the target. Chopin shouted with delight to Adele that she was incredible, and the girl, realizing that she had hit, also rejoiced at her fast-growing success and smiled. Serena, who had been watching everything closely, praised the girl too, saying it was great. Even Teacher Blake, who smiled very rarely, especially when Adele was around, smiled. The young lord remarked that it wasn't bad for the first time. Blake gave the protagonist another arrow and asked her to shoot it again, which the girl willingly agreed to. Watching carefully as Adele holds the bow, the lord tells his apprentice not to tense her shoulders too much and to get used to the stance. The young boy also tells Adele to relax and focus on the target and draw the bowstring, making sure the arrow is put in correctly or else the girl will hurt herself. After listening to all the advice and being allowed to shoot, Adele tensed up again, hoping to hit at least the circle and supporting herself that she could do it. Releasing an arrow from the bow, Adele expects that the second shot will not disappoint anyone, and in fact, the arrow hit the target a second time, something the girl was incredibly eager for. Chopin again smiled with joy, turning around and telling the protagonist that she had hit the circle. Adele was just as shocked, realizing that she had archery skills. Blake watched with interest as Adele immediately did well, saying that if she succeeded, they could even participate in a hunting competition together. Adele asked her brother if she could actually participate in the hunt. Blake replied that nothing was impossible for her. The little girl thought about it, for she had always dreamed not of a hunting contest, but of giving an embroidered handkerchief to a knight before the tournament, as in the stories in the books. She could, for example, give her embroidered shawl to Mikhail, whom she looked at with sadness. Mikhail looked at the girl too, not understanding why she was staring at him. A bit weather. Adele turned away from him so as not to embarrass him, accepting the fact that hunting competitions were fine too. Turning to Blake's teacher, the protagonist boldly told him that she would participate in the hunting competition and would definitely beat him. Blake was silent at first, but then clarified with the small and brave girl if she would beat him. Adele replied that she would, but someday, adding that she would also get stronger. Adele's older brother put his hand on the top of her head, saying that those were not the most appropriate words for a first archery lesson. Adele became sad, saying that she was being too arrogant right now. But suddenly, lifting the girl's chin to his face, Blake told Adele that of all the things she had said to her, those words were most appropriate for a child of prophecy. Blake told the girl to raise her head and she didn't need to apologize. The girl embarrassedly agreed with her brother's words, and then the Lord said that the class was over for the day. Blake was about to leave his student, but then the girl stopped him, asking if she could ask him a question. Interested, but still frowning, Blake turned to the girl and angrily told her to speak. The protagonist began to speak by saying that she was looking for one person. But when Blake asked who exactly, Adele remembered that Han was her secret friend, and she didn't know if she could tell her brother about him. Because of that, the girl didn't continue the sentence, creating an awkward silence. Blake decided to interrupt the girl's silence, saying that he knows perfectly well that the girl dreams of a big family. The protagonist did not understand why her brother suddenly decided to talk about family, but Blake continued his speech that if the one she was looking for was Lagasse, locked in the tower, then it was better for her to forget about him. Little Adele had no idea who her brother was talking about, so she asked him who Lagasse was. Blake was surprised and asked if Adele meant him, to which the heroine said she wasn't talking about him. Blake became uncomfortable with the situation, and little Adele noticed it, thinking that she shouldn't know about something about a man named Lagasse. Adele noticed that Serena's face changed as well when the name Lagasse was mentioned in the conversation. Blake then asked Adele who she really meant, to which Adele said that the person she was talking about was a servant and worked in the Duke's palace. The girl decided to say that his friend's name is Kahan, and he has silver hair like snow, and he also has black eyes. The girl once again asked Blake if he knew such a person. Lord Blake, along with Serena, were wary when Adele simply told them about her friend she wanted to find. After a bit of silence, her brother put his hand on Adele's head again, telling her to study harder. Adele doesn't understand what her brother is talking about. Blake turned around, walking away from Adele and telling her that he would leave her himself and telling her to study harder. But Adele insisted that her brother tell her about him, because he obviously knows something, but Blake still left without saying a word. The girl decided not to pester her brother with questions and let him leave. Instead, she had the urge to go up to Sir Michael and ask him something, apologizing before doing so. Little Adele curiously asked the knight if it was true that she and her brother were originally supposed to be married. The girl said she had heard about it, but from whom and where she didn't mention. Michael was truly shocked to hear such words from a little girl. Chopin and Serena were also puzzled by Adele's straightforwardness. Sir Michael asked the protagonist in amazement who dared to say such a thing to her, to which the girl confessed that her father had told her. Knight Michael hid his face with his hand in embarrassment and replied that he could not answer that question, but he also apologized to Adele. The girl was confused, saying that it was no big deal, and she would pretend like she didn't hear anything. While Adele thought about how embarrassed Michael was, and about how she shouldn't continue the conversation anymore, Michael was ready to fall into the ground from shame, and Chopin supported him with a smile and irony, telling the leader to remember that suicide is not the way out of this situation. After a successful archery lesson, little Adele started reading books while sitting in the garden, for her brother and Michael had said that she should study hard to get closer to her father, but she was still interested in who Lagasse was. Calling out to the young lady, Serena walked over to the girl and placed a dish on the table, suggesting that she at least eat dessert and not sit at her books all the time. The hard-working Adele merely quipped at the maid's words as she continued to diligently read her book. Serena told the girl again that it was getting dark and they had better call it a day. But the main character continued to read the book diligently, keeping her eyes on it, and briefly told Serena that it was no problem for her and she could study until late at night. So for Adele, 5 long days passed. During this time, books came easily to her, but many of the words in them were still not clear to her. The girl labored to read many books while the maid stood by and admired her diligence and sweetness. However, in all the time she has been studying, she has not forgotten one thing at all. She still wondered if Kahan was a servant, as he called himself. The girl guesses that he is far from it, but why didn't he tell the girl? Adele thinks that Kahan is definitely the son of an aristocrat, and she will be sure to ask him about it on their next meeting. With these thoughts, the little working girl let herself rest at the table, resting her head on her books and continuing to think about Kahan, Papa, and the members of her large family. After a while, a letter came to Adele from Ian's teacher saying that all the wounds he had received had already healed. The main character happily read the letter along with Serena. The sweet girl also remembered an eternally sullen Lord Blake. Adele did not see her brother after 2 archery classes, which made her more sad. The same situation the protagonist had with her dad. But Adele believed Mikhail, who once told her that Daddy would only come if she was in the rose garden. The girl is ready to wait as long as it takes. But still, Adele is very lonely. Even though she had kind maids and faithful guards with her around the clock, the little girl still felt anxious because everyone only tells her to wait. In all that time, she never got to meet her daddy, Kahan, or Blake. Sometimes the fire and earth spirits would show up to check on the girl and inquire about her well-being. To all of them, Adele answered that all was well. One day, the little lady was reading countless thick books as usual in the blooming garden, but she was interrupted by voices that were near her and called out to the girl, calling her lady. The voices belonged to 2 maids who stood admiring the efforts of the protagonist, for she had read all the books on the table, but she had only recently learned the alphabet. They added that the lady appeared to be very capable. Having found the strength to read another book completely, the girl proudly slammed it shut, reflecting that she had barely read it because of boredom, from which she even almost fell asleep. But the petite and prolific princess wasn't going to stop, for she felt that she had too little time left. Adele decided to go to the palace library and find more books to keep learning. But her search for a suitable book was interrupted by a male voice that called out to her, also calling her lady. Turning around, the little girl saw her favorite knights, Thora and Chopin, walking towards her with a smile, apparently about to announce good things to her. Bowing to the small and young lady, who held a thick book in her hands, Chopin happily informed the heroine that Madeline's best friend's reply had arrived. The sadness and homesickness was able to leave the girl when she realized that a return letter from her best friend had arrived. Adele smiled with joy, already impatient to read it. Opening the letter, sweet Adele read Madeline's words, which began with a greeting and that she didn't need to apologize. Madeline wrote that she would always support the protagonist. In addition to that, Madeline's letter wrote that even if she is not around, Adele's friend is still thinking about her. The letter ended by saying that Adele should definitely find a way to meet her, and Madeline would be waiting for her. Adele was incredibly touched by her friend's words in the letter, which were sincere. Tears came to the protagonist's eyes, and she also realized that Jenny, a girl Madeline is not friends with, had helped her read the letter and write a reply after all. But then the little lady was called by Chopin. When Adele, wiping her eyes from tears, looked at her knight who had delivered the letter to her, Chopin bowed to her again and said that it was their duty to do the girl's errands. Adele thanked him for this. After thanking her assistant, little Adele complimented him, smiling happily and saying that his iridescent hair always seemed elegant to her. While Chopin grinned at his young and happy mistress, Tora, standing behind, was confused and seemed to want such nice words from Adele as well. Tora confided to the girl that she was very sweet. Chopin proclaimed with joy and feigned seriousness that he had always known that someone would come along who would understand his sense of beauty, and that this was what he expected from the child of prophecy. Adele said that this was the real Chopin for her. But while Adele was rejoicing and laughing with Chopin and Tora, she was still reeling from Madeline's words that she must find a way to meet her, and if the little girl made more effort, she could see her Madeline. Besides Madeline, Adele was also thinking about her daddy, and if he can't come to her, Adele will find him herself. With these thoughts, the protagonist borrowed another book from the librarian to start reading it in the palace garden. The book from the library also turned out to have complicated words, which already bored the girl and made her time in the garden boring. Adele could even feel herself falling asleep due to boredom. But the girl's sleepiness is removed when she, thinking about Madeline and meeting her, suddenly thought of and found a way to meet her father. While the protagonist was out of sorts due to boredom and homesickness, things were going smoothly for Duke Eisen. He sat on the sofa and quietly drank tea while asking Knight Mikhail about Adele. Mikhail answered his duke that the young lady was studying hard until today. And about this the knight is worried, for it is because of him that the little girl is always studying in the garden. Adele believed Mikhail's words that if she studies diligently in the garden, she will be able to get closer to her father, but in truth, the words about being able to get closer to the Duke were lies. It was only to instill in the lady a desire to learn. Sir Michael continued sadly thinking that they only have a month to prepare, and he would never lie to the young lady, but she is a child of prophecy. Watching the young lady put all her effort into studying and meeting her daddy for 5 days, Michael thought to himself, and apologized to Adele for lying to her. While Adele was studying hard to get her father's attention, Duke Azin was holding a big training battle between his knights in the palace. He stood on a dais in front of the sparring participants so that he was clearly visible and the Duke could see everyone. Piercing the fighters with red eyes, the brave and stern Duke ordered everyone to bare the blades of their swords. More than 5,000 elite soldiers who have been through more than one war were part of the knightly order, and each of them is proud to be a part of it and fight on the front lines as Chopin, Tora, Rascal, Fabian, and Mikhail are. And the one who leads the large and elite troops of the mighty empire is none other than Duke Alcibiade. Alcibiades' troops could be, numbering 30,000, maybe 100,000, even 300,000. For this reason, other aristocrats with their armies didn't risk attacking first and felt afraid of the Duke's army. Even though the Duke's sword during the age of war is aimed at protecting the country, it doesn't mean that one day he won't raise a rebellion. Unveiling the long blade of his sword, the Duke told the knights that they would now have a several-on-one fight, and the opponent of the fighters would be Duke Azin himself. Mikhail, who was standing at the Duke's contest with the knights, was surprised, for it was his cherished wish to fight the Duke, even though he was afraid. The Duke justified his words by saying that the only way to test the knight's abilities was to take up the sword. But Mikhail interrupted him, suggesting not to organize a duel all on one, and first write down the names of each on a sheet of paper, and then arrange a random distribution, that is, the draw. But Duke Azin waved his hand, saying that it was not worth it, and that he would choose the first group of fighters by rank. With those words, he looked at the fighters, and seemed to already know who he wanted to choose. Eisen immediately called out the names of knights like Dagon, Flickton, Valberith, Leonar, and Viranam. All of the summoned soldiers thanked the Duke for the first opportunity to fight him. What Mikhail noticed was that the Duke had chosen 2 from the generals of the 5,000 army and 3 from the 1,000 army. Furthermore, Duke Eisen pronounced their names as if he had memorized them, preparing in advance. He must definitely be planning something. The 5 fighters stepped forward and stood in front of the Duke as he said that he would start the training fights with the 5 of them. After that, Azin ordered them to attack first. At first, all 5 knights did not rush to swing at the Duke, but only glared at him, preparing to attack. And the first one who dared to strike Azin was the brown-haired Dagon. With his sword, he wanted to strike Azin's shoulder first from above, putting a lot of effort on it, but the Duke deftly dodged his blade, continuing to look at his opponents with a smile. Then Duke Azin was attacked by all 5 fighters at once, but the experienced Azin continued to deftly dodge the quick blows of his opponents. One of the knights named Valberith decided to use cunning and attack the Duke from behind, swinging his sword at his head while he was dodging other blows from the fighters. But his cunning plan failed because the agile Duke instantly turned around and swung his sword, making a deep scratch on the shoulder of the shocked Valberith. The other combatants noticed Valberith's mistake, for which he paid the price. Their faces read shock and confusion. Unable to hold back his anger at the knights, Azin turned his angry and maddened gaze on them, a look that boded only bad things to come. With a deft movement of his sword, the Duke gave a strong and large blow to a black-haired fighter named Leonar as well, causing him to fall to the ground, bleeding. Azin told him that he should have taken his training more seriously, because if they didn't kill him, the Duke would do it first. The other knights felt a primal fear when they saw their comrade lying on the ground. They didn't understand what it all meant, so they asked the Duke about it. But it was beginning to dawn on them that Duke Azin was well aware of their secret plans and schemes. Therefore, all the surviving knights kneeled before Duke Alcibiade, begging for forgiveness. But the angry Duke did not even think of forgiving the traitors. He asked them if the 5 really thought he wouldn't find out that they had been double agents all this time. Even more angry, Azin, whose eyes lit up with anger, asked them how dare they use his daughter's name to spy on him. This story began with a traitor appearing among the soldiers. Just recently, the Duke summoned all the Knights General of the 1,000-man army and told them the location of the vaults with military supplies. Immediately afterward, 5 military food stores were engulfed in flames and destroyed, and yet Aizen had given each person different information about them. And a few weeks ago, there was a leak of top-secret military information that definitely couldn't be revealed. After that, a 1,000-man army sent to defend the border was trapped and completely wiped out. Adele's spies realized that the Duke had sacrificed military provisions in order to figure out the traitors, which he had succeeded in doing. It turns out that these were not just practice battles, but a real massacre. The knights who watched it were amazed at the treachery of their comrades and the cold-blooded cruelty of the Duke, who arranged the execution in the presence of the soldiers. But quite unexpectedly for the bloodied and angry Aizen, who was standing among the slain men, he heard behind him a familiar, sweet, and childlike voice calling him Daddy. While Aizen calmly asked the girl about who brought her here, Adele looked at the bloody and lying people with real horror and fear on her face. The girl answered her daddy that she had asked to come herself because she missed her, and behind her all this time stood Chopin and Tora worshipping the Duke. Duke Aizen seemed to be completely confused because he didn't know what to say, but then he ordered one of the knights to close the main character's eyes. While Tora obeyed the Duke's order and covered Adele's eyes with her hand, Aizen told everyone that he would go wash his face, after which he would come to Adele. After the unexpected incident, Tora carried the small and shocked lady on her arm in the palace, reassuring her that the Duke would come to those soon, and she only needed to wait for him in her chambers. It turns out that when the girl took another book from the library, in it she read that there is evaluation of the knights by the head of the Alkiviad family, and it is the Duke's duty to check the combat readiness of the knights every month. Realizing that this was happening today, the girl decided to meet her daddy at the training ground where he was. For the first time in a long time, little Adele managed to meet her dad, but she was overwhelmed by the thought that a man died before her eyes. The protagonist is scared because of this. After a moment, Daddy appeared in front of the girl, who was heading towards her already in different clothes and without blood on his body. Adele suddenly remembered that she had read the book, The Basics of Aristocratic Culture and Etiquette, and decided to surprise her father. Standing up from her seat, coming closer to her father and bowing, the girl, on behalf of the sun god and all mankind, wished him glory and blessings. After the aristocratic greeting with Daddy, the little girl was silent, waiting to see what Daddy would say and how he would react. But he first asked her what she had just done. Little Adele answered the Duke that she had read it in a book about aristocratic etiquette and manners. But Duke Aizen took his head in his hands and said that it was the greeting the baronesses use when they meet him. The little girl was frightened and asked her daddy if she was mistaken, to which the Duke simply told her to call him Daddy as before, for she was his daughter. Aizen lifted the little girl into his arms, saying that it was enough for him to continue to love her. But as she listened to her daddy's words, Adele noticed that sometimes her daddy's red eyes looked like blood. But, seeing Papa covered head to toe in real blood, Adele seemed to understand why only the Duke could adopt her. The fact is that Duke Aizen bears the burden of power, and Adele is chosen to be the child of prophecy. It turns out they are both divine beings. Adele realizes that her daddy has given her a great responsibility. The little girl notices that her daddy is cold and hasn't even dried her hair, which she asks him about, and her daddy tells her that the girl was waiting for him after all, and he can't stay there drying his hair, leaving the girl alone. After letting the girl off his hands, Aizen decided to talk to his daughter about her studies, saying that he heard Adele was studying hard. The Duke asked the little girl if she had learned about the knight's readiness test from the book, too. Adele did not answer the question, but even without the girl's answer, it was clear that she had. Adele lowered her head in shame and said that she had wronged her father and asked the Duke if he would punish her for it. At this time, the knight Mikkel, who rushed to the Duke and Adele to guard them, rushed to the father and daughter. The Duke replied to the protagonist that of course he would not punish her, for he could not do that to his daughter. Instead, he told a joyful Adele that she had better be rewarded with something for her studies. After asking her daddy if she could ask him for any gift and receiving a positive answer from her daddy, the girl took Aizen's hand and said she wanted to sleep with him. But Azen poked his index finger on the girl's forehead, saying that he could fulfill anything but that, for he was not comfortable sleeping with Adele. The girl actually remembered that the last time they had fallen asleep together, Daddy had been uncomfortable because of the clothes and Adele herself. Adele didn't get too upset, saying that she wanted to go on an outing with the whole family then, taking ciabatta, eating grapes, and having something similar to a picnic. The Duke asked the cute girl what ciabatta was, and the protagonist answered her dad that it was boiled potatoes doused with mayonnaise. Eisen praised the girl for already knowing a lot of things, then picked up a purple grape and asked his daughter that if it was a family picnic, would she want to call Blake too? As soon as the young father heard his daughter say that she missed her brother Blake a lot too, his gaze instantly frowned, after which the Duke said he didn't want to. Papa asked the little girl why he should share such a precious chance with him. After all, it was the first time they were going out together, and he wanted to enjoy it himself. Without even listening to Adele's possible objections, Duke Eisen ordered the servants to prepare grapes and ciabatta for them and clear the path for them to walk. After all, they were leaving right now. The servant girls bowed their heads to the Duke and went to carry out the order. At this point, Mikhail entered the room and apologized to Adele and was about to say something to her, but he was interrupted by Adele's chief jealousy. Duke Eisen watched carefully as Mikhail just stared at Adele while the maids helped him remove his outer clothing from his body. Then he remembered something and decided to approach. As he approached Mikhail and Adele, he told the main character that he had heard Mayal liked purple grapes because of their color. The girl replied that she did, but she didn't understand how he knew that. Daddy handed his daughter a purple grape from the table, which is what they are talking about, and told the cute girl to try it. Adele plucked and tasted one berry of the grape and exclaimed that it was very tasty. The Duke then turned to Mikhail with a personal grudge and asked the girl if Adele wanted to keep Mikhail as a gift. The violet-eyed knight doesn't understand the Duke's words, so he interjects. But the Duke once again tells the girl to wear her new talisman in the form of Mikhail for the rest of her life. While near the protagonist, Eisen decided to joke that he could gouge out Mikhail's one eye and put it in a solution with formalin. But the knight immediately warned the Duke that you can't make such jokes while talking to a small child. While the girl was trying to figure out who the formalin solution was, Serena said they'd better not interfere with the incomprehensible conversations, while Mikhail told the Duke that Adele still couldn't even recover from the shock. And so, when the Duke appeared fully prepared for the family picnic, he held out his hand to the little girl, telling her to go. The snow-white carriage in which the girl was traveling to her destination finally stopped and allowed Adele to get out for a walk. The girl was dressed up in a cute and lovely yellow dress for the picnic, in which the girl looked like a little sunshine or a ray of light. Serena, who also went to the picnic, covered the girl's head with a little yellow umbrella, saying that she mustn't get sunburned, for it was midday and the sun was most tormenting at that time. Little Adele asked the maid to give the umbrella to her for convenience, and then walked on the grass with a smile, for with her yellow dress and umbrella of the same color, she now looked like a real aristocrat. Rejoicing at the umbrella, Adele saw in front of her daddy, who was dressed up with bright and expensive clothes, next to which stood the maids. Daddy also noticed little Adele. The protagonist, being of short stature, tried also to cover the head of tall Azen with an umbrella so that he would not be scorched by the sun, but Papa only stood and asked Adele with bewilderment what she was doing, and she answered that she did not want him to be burned. The Duke did take Adele's yellow umbrella in his hands, but he grinned and answered her that he didn't get burned, and besides, he looked beautiful with a tan. The sweet girl looked at her father and thought that the Duke's face, illuminated by the sunlight, shines even brighter. It is very snow-white. Adele remembered her brother Blake's face when they first met, which was also pale. The girl wondered if all Alcibiades were like that. Adele had mentioned to her father that they say that aristocrats have blue blood. Eisen asked the girl where she had heard that, to which she said she had read it in the book, The Basics of Aristocratic Culture and Etiquette. The Duke said there were some inaccuracies in the book. The main character does remember that Papa's scratch on her cheek was red, but not blue, which is what she told Papa. Catching the words funny for a red-eyed aristocrat, Eisen laughed modestly, but little Adele was quite surprised and pleased. Overjoyed, Adele asked her daddy to stand still while she searched around the garden for a present for him. Azen was confused by the sudden change of wishes of the protagonist, but still remained in place to wait for his daughter, wondering what kind of gift Adele had in mind. The gift that Adele wanted so much to give turned out to be a homemade wreath, which consisted of different blue, yellow, pink, purple, and green colors. The girl didn't like the fact that it looked a little sloppy and flimsy, like it was about to fall apart, but still, the girl tried hard on it. A little saddened by the clumsy wreath, the girl was suddenly interrupted by a water spirit in the form of a blob that appeared in front of Adele's face. The girl smiled at him, saying that she was glad to meet him. The girl decided to ask the water spirit if he could summon an earth spirit for her, and because the water spirit apparently answered no to the heroine, Adele sighed heavily, realizing that she would have to finish the wreath herself. But little Adele suddenly said to herself that she had to make a present for her daddy, so she must do her best. The water spirit only smiled at the girl's every word. Meanwhile, Eisen continued to wait for his daughter on the bedspread, which already had sweets and other food on it. He couldn't wait to see Adele in her surprise. With the edge of his ear, he heard small footsteps behind him. The Duke turned around when he heard Adele calling for him. Holding her handiwork in her earth-dirty hands, Adele showed her daddy her made wreath, to which the Duke said if this was the gift she was talking about. While Duke Eisen called his daughter's gift a flabby wreath of flowers, Adele happily told him that it was her gift to him. The girl's father suddenly said that he didn't need the wreath, about which the girl interrogated him, not believing that the Duke would so easily refuse her gift. The girl really realized that such an influential and formidable aristocrat as her daddy, such things do not go to his face. But still, the girl tried hard on him, which upset her. But then the girl's father decided to take the wreath in his hand, thus accepting the girl's gift. But after that, Duke Eisen told the protagonist to sit down to him. Adele did as her father asked, sat down next to him. The girl also paid attention to the cakes on the bedspread, but abruptly a smiling water spirit appeared beside her again. The girl quietly whispered something to the water spirit, to which the spirit immediately agreed and began to fulfill Adele's request. Applying its magic on the girl's hands, the water spirit was able to effortlessly clean Adele's hands from dirt, which surprised the main character.